The universe is not sharing the same now with us, not even close. Every breath you take, every second you believe is unfolding in the present, is already out of sync with most of reality. The light touching your eyes has traveled for years, centuries, sometimes millions of years, before it reached you. What you call now is stitched together from fragments of different pasts, arriving late, uneven, and already gone. And yet, your mind insists on calling this moment real, immediate, alive. Tonight, let us slow that certainty down. Because if time does not flow evenly across the universe, if it stretches, pools, accelerates, and thins depending on where you are, then the idea of a single, shared present quietly dissolves, and in its place appears something far more unsettling and far more beautiful. We tend to imagine time as a straight river, carrying everything forward together. Stars, planets, thoughts, memories floating side by side toward the same future. It is comforting. It feels fair. It gives meaning to words like before and after, too late and not yet, ist brens. But the universe has never promised fairness. From the very first measurements of distant space, a quiet problem appeared. The farther we looked, the older everything became. Galaxies at the edge of observation were not just far away, they were young, primitive, still forming. Meanwhile, the stars above your head tonight are at wildly different stages of their lives. Some are stable, some are dying, some no longer exist at all, and yet they all appear together in the same sky. This is where the first crack forms. Because if you are seeing objects that exist at different moments in time, then the sky is not a snapshot of the present. It is a collage, a layered archive, a museum where no two exhibits belong to the same year. We say, look up, as if we are looking outward, but in truth, we are looking backward into many different pasts at once. A star 10 light years away shows you itself as it was 10 years ago. Another, 1,000 light years away, shows you a version that existed when human civilization was still learning how to write. And farther still, entire galaxies appear as they were before Earth even existed. So when you look up at the night sky, how many nows are you actually seeing? The question feels abstract at first, harmless, philosophical, but it begins to grow heavier when you realize something else. Time does not merely appear uneven because of distance, it is uneven because it truly is. According to modern physics, time does not tick at the same rate everywhere. It stretches in strong gravitational fields. It slows near massive objects. It speeds up for systems in motion. Two clocks, placed in different conditions, will disagree, not symbolically, but measurably. Time behaves less like a universal metronome and more like a fluid, thick in some regions, thin in others, flowing quickly here, sluggishly there, bending, pooling, and drifting depending on where you are and how you move. And fluids do not synchronize themselves. This is the moment where most explanations pause. They reassure you. They tell you this only matters for satellites, for equations, for extreme environments far from daily life. They gently guide you back to the familiar idea that, for practical purposes, now still exists. But let us not rush, because if time truly behaves like a fluid, then the universe is not experiencing a single present moment. It is experiencing countless local nows, each shaped by gravity, motion, and position, each isolated, each valid only within its own conditions, which raises a question we almost never ask. Is now something real or something local? We speak of the present as if it were a place everyone occupies together. But what if it is closer to a neighborhood? Something you share only with what is near you, moving with you, bound by the same gravitational environment? What if now does not stretch across the universe at all? This is where the ground begins to fall away, because if there is no universal present, then the universe is not unfolding together. Events do not line up neatly along a shared timeline. Instead, reality fractures into overlapping layers of time, each unaware of the others except through delayed signals. Light becomes the messenger, and light is always late. The observation you make arrives after the fact, always. There is no exception. Even the sound of your own breath reaches your awareness a fraction of a second after it happens. Your nervous system itself introduces delay. By the time you feel a sensation, the physical event that caused it is already over. You are never experiencing the present moment. You are experiencing a carefully stitched reconstruction of what just happened. And the universe is doing the same thing everywhere. This is the conflict we rarely confront, not because it is hidden, but because it is deeply uncomfortable. If the present does not exist as a universal condition, then all shared experiences are illusions of alignment. We feel synchronized only because delays are small enough to ignore. But scale them up across planets, stars, galaxies, and synchronization collapses entirely. The universe becomes asynchronous, dislocated, out of phase with itself. And right here, after this realization settles in, before we drift further, let me pause for a brief moment. You're listening to Whispers of the Universe. If this way of seeing reality resonates with you, if these quiet questions feel worth keeping alive, please take a second to like this video, share it with someone who enjoys drifting through big ideas, and subscribe to the channel. Each small gesture helps this quiet space continue to exist. Now, let us continue. Because once we accept that time is uneven, another strange realization follows. The present you inhabit is not just local, it is temporary, in a way you cannot escape. Everything around you is already slipping into the past, faster than you can perceive it. The room you are in, the sound of this voice, the thoughts forming in your mind, they are all arriving late to consciousness. You are always behind the universe, trying to catch up, and yet, your mind smooths this delay into a seamless experience. It gives you continuity. It gives you flow. It gives you the comforting illusion that you are standing inside the present moment. But illusions, when examined closely, tell us something important. They reveal what the mind needs in order to function. A perfectly accurate perception of time, one that exposed every delay, every misalignment, every asynchronous signal, would be unbearable. Consciousness requires coherence. It needs a stable narrative. So the brain does what it does best. It edits. It merges. It averages. It creates a usable now from incompatible data streams. In this sense, the present moment is not discovered. It is constructed. And this construction is fragile, because the moment you look beyond your immediate surroundings, the illusion starts to fail. The stars betray it. The physics undermines it. The sheer scale of the universe refuses to cooperate. There is no cosmic drumbeat keeping everything together. There is no master clock. There is no shared now. With 30, only islands of time, drifting through a much larger temporal sea. Imagine, for a moment, a region of space where gravity is intense near a massive object, where time flows significantly slower than it does here. To an observer there, their thoughts feel normal, their heartbeat feels steady, their life unfolds naturally. But from your perspective, everything in that region is moving in slow motion. Years pass for you while moments pass for them. Now imagine another region, far from massive structures, where time flows more quickly relative to yours. Entire civilizations could rise and fall there in what feels like a blink from your point of view. None of these regions are wrong. None of them are privileged. They are simply out of sync. And here is the twist that quietly reshapes everything. The universe does not care about synchronization. There is no requirement that events align across space. No obligation for fairness. No guarantee that existence unfolds at a uniform pace. Synchronization is something we crave, not something reality provides. This is why the idea of a universal present feels so natural and so false. It is a human desire projected onto a cosmos that never agreed to it. As you sit here now, listening, your present moment feels solid, immediate, real. But beyond the thin bubble of your surroundings, time is flowing differently. Vast regions of space are experiencing their own versions of now, inaccessible to you except through delayed signals that will arrive long after those moments have passed. You are not late to the universe. You are simply localized within it. And this realization carries a subtle, almost calming consequence. If the universe itself is not synchronized, then perhaps meaning does not require perfect alignment. Perhaps existence does not demand that everything happen together to be real. Maybe value, experience, and awareness are allowed to be local too. This thought will take us much deeper, because once we let go of a shared present, we begin to see time not as a line we are moving along, but as an environment we are embedded in, one that shapes us differently depending on where we stand. And if time behaves like a fluid, then the question is no longer whether it flows evenly. The question becomes whether we are drifting with it or resisting currents we were never meant to fight. Let that question remain open, gently suspended as we move forward, because the next step is not to understand time better, but to understand what it means to live inside something that was never meant to stay still. Time does not behave like a line. It never truly has. We draw it that way because lines feel safe. They move forward. They promise direction. They allow us to point and say, before, after, beginning, end. A line suggests fairness, every point treated the same, every moment passing with identical weight. But the universe has been quietly refusing that shape. If you watch carefully, time behaves less like a ruler and more like a substance, something that gathers, stretches, thins, and thickens, something that flows differently depending on where you are and what surrounds you. Not everywhere at once, not equally. Think for a moment about how water behaves. In open space, it spreads evenly, but introduce terrain depth, obstacles, pressure, and it changes instantly. It pools in low places. It accelerates through narrow passages. It slows when resistance builds. Two leaves dropped a few meters apart can drift at entirely different speeds, never touching again. Time does the same thing, only we rarely feel it. Because where we live, the currents are gentle. The first hint comes from gravity, not as an abstract force, but as an environmental condition. Where gravity is stronger, time slows, not symbolically, not metaphorically, physically, measurably. Clocks placed in stronger gravitational fields tick more slowly than identical clocks placed farther away. This is not theory. It has been tested, repeated, confirmed. Time thickens near mass. And where time thickens, events take longer to unfold. At least, longer relative to somewhere else. This is the part that quietly unsettles us. Because once time can flow at different rates in different places, it stops being a universal background. It becomes local, contextual, dependent, like temperature, like pressure, like density. No one expects water to behave the same way at the bottom of the ocean as it does in open air. Yet we expect time to remain unchanged near stars, planets, and black holes, as if mass should politely step aside and let seconds pass uninterrupted. The universe does not negotiate. It shapes time the way it shapes space, by bending it, stretching it, and allowing it to move. Slowly, a different picture forms. Not a timeline, a current. In some regions, time flows gently, almost lazily. In others, it rushes forward, thin and fast. There are places where it nearly stands still, and places where it races ahead so quickly that entire histories could pass while you wait. And here is the first soft drop. If time behaves like a fluid, then being alive means you are always floating inside a current. You are not standing on time. You are immersed in it. This changes how we should think about motion, because motion through space is also motion through time. The faster you move, the more time resists you. It stretches behind you, like water dragging at your body as you swim faster. This resistance is subtle at everyday speeds. You do not feel it. You do not notice your clock drifting from the clock of someone standing still. But it happens nonetheless. The universe keeps track, even when you do not. And it keeps track differently, depending on where you are. Now let us lift slightly. This does not mean time is broken. It means time is responsive. It reacts. It adapts. It flows around mass and motion the way air flows around mountains and wings. This is not chaos. It is structure, just not the kind we expected. The problem arises when we insist on asking the wrong question. We keep asking, "What time is it in the universe?" End quote. But a fluid does not answer that question. You do not ask the ocean what its depth is everywhere at once. You ask where you are standing. Time answers only locally. Here, now, relative to this place, this motion, this gravitational field. The moment you try to extend that answer outward to apply it universally, it dissolves. This is where our intuition begins to fail us. Because if time flows differently in different regions, then now is not a global condition. It is not something the universe shares all at once. It is something that exists only within a neighborhood of reality, a small bubble where conditions are similar enough for clocks to agree. Outside that bubble, agreement fades, gradually, then completely. This does not happen abruptly. There is no sharp boundary where time suddenly fractures. Instead, synchronization slowly erodes with distance, gravity, and motion, like two swimmers starting side by side, then drifting apart as currents pull them in different directions. From a distance, they still appear close, but they are no longer sharing the same flow. Now, allow the next thought to arrive. If time is a fluid, then it can carry things. It can transport states, events, possibilities, and like any fluid, it can trap, isolate, or separate. Imagine a region of space where time flows far more slowly than it does here. Not frozen, just slower. A place where a single second for you corresponds to hours, days, or years elsewhere. From inside that region, nothing feels unusual. Life unfolds normally. Thoughts arrive at their usual pace. Change feels continuous. But from the outside, that region becomes a pocket of suspended motion, a temporal eddy, a place that lags behind the rest of the universe. It is not behind in space, it is behind in time. Now imagine the opposite, a region where time flows faster, where processes accelerate, where decay, growth, and change race ahead. From there, the rest of the universe appears sluggish, frozen, incomplete. Neither perspective is wrong. They are simply out of sync. This is where the second drop comes. We often assume that difference requires separation, but time allows difference without distance. Two regions can occupy the same universe and yet exist in vastly different temporal states. This means the universe is not unfolding as a single story. It is unfolding as many overlapping stories, each written at a different pace. And we are reading them all at once, stitched together by delayed signals. This realization lifts us briefly, because it explains something we have always felt but never named. Why the universe feels uneven. Why some things seem impossibly ancient, while others feel fleeting. Why meaning stretches and compresses depending on scale. We are not imagining it. We are sensing temporal gradients. But then comes the next twist. If time flows like a fluid, then there is no privileged current, no central stream, no main channel that everything else must follow. There is only local flow, local pace, locale present. This quietly removes the idea of a cosmic reference point. There is no master clock ticking somewhere beyond the stars, no universal moment that everything must align with. The universe does not pause to synchronize, it simply flows. And this brings us to an uncomfortable but necessary tension. If time is uneven, then simultaneity becomes fragile. Events we call simultaneous are only so because delays are small and conditions are similar. Stretch those conditions, and simultaneity dissolves. Two events you believe are happening at the same time may not share any meaningful temporal relationship at all beyond your local frame. This is not a flaw in perception. It is a limitation imposed by flow. And once you accept this, something subtle changes in how you experience existence. The present moment loses its sharp edges. It becomes soft, fuzzy, contextual. Your now is no longer a slice of the universe. It is a region of agreement, a temporary alignment between clocks, signals, and awareness. On that region, time simply does something else, quietly, indifferently. This is not meant to unsettle you. In fact, there is something deeply calming about it. Because if time is a fluid, then resistance is optional. You are not required to keep up with the universe. You are not late. You are not behind. You are exactly where the current places you, and so is everything else. Stars are not rushing towards some shared future. Galaxies are not waiting for us to catch up. They are drifting through their own temporal environments, unfolding at their own pace. And we are merely visitors, observing from one small, gently flowing region. This perspective softens urgency. It loosens the grip of deadlines and absolutes. It suggests that meaning does not come from synchronization, but from immersion, from being present within your current, rather than trying to align with all others. And yet, one question remains, quietly pulsing beneath all of this. If time flows differently everywhere, if the universe is composed of countless local currents, then what happens when those currents carry information toward one another? What happens when signals cross from fast regions to slow ones? What happens when light leaves one temporal environment and enters another? Because this is where things begin to overlap, and where the sky becomes something stranger than a map of space. It becomes a map of temporal mismatch. Hold that thought. Let it remain suspended, like a leaf drifting toward a boundary between two currents. Because the next step is not about how time flows, but about what we actually see when those flows collide. The sky does not show you space. It shows you time under pressure. When you look up, it feels natural to believe you are seeing distant stars far away, galaxies scattered across a vast emptiness. But distance is only half the story. The other half is quieter, heavier, and far more influential. What you are really seeing is time distorted by gravity, not symbolically, not poetically, physically. Gravity does not only pull matter inward, it pulls time with it. It bends the rate at which moments unfold, stretching seconds near massive objects and loosening them where mass thins out. Time does not resist, it yields. This is not an exotic effect reserved for black holes and distant equations. It is happening everywhere, all the time. The Earth itself slows time ever so slightly at its surface. Your feet experience time differently than your head. The difference is tiny, far too small to feel, but it exists. And the universe keeps count. This is the quiet sculpting of time. Mass presses inward, and time thickens. Remove mass, and time relaxes. The heavier the object, the deeper the distortion. Now let the first drop arrive. If gravity reshapes time, then the universe is filled with invisible gradients of duration. Regions where seconds stretch longer than they should. Regions where moments slip by faster than expected. No clear boundaries, just gradual warping, like hills and valleys carved into the fabric of time itself. And gravity is everywhere. Every star you see is not just emitting light, it is altering the pace of time around it. Every planet is a small temporal well. Every galaxy is a vast basin where time flows more slowly than it does in the emptier spaces between them. This means the universe is not only uneven in space, it is uneven in tempo. Now let us lift slightly, because this distortion does not announce itself. It does not flash or vibrate. From within any given region, everything feels normal. Heartbeats remain steady, thoughts unfold smoothly. Life continues without interruption. Time only reveals its unevenness when compared. Place two clocks in different gravitational environments. Bring them back together, and they will disagree. Not because one is broken, but because they lived through different amounts of time. Both are correct. This is where intuition begins to lose its footing. We are accustomed to thinking of time as something that happens to objects. But here, time is responding to objects. It reacts to mass the way water reacts to pressure. Gravity does not merely exist inside time. Time exists inside gravity. And once you see this, it becomes difficult to maintain the idea of a single, shared present. Because how could there be? Time is slowed here and accelerated there, then two regions cannot honestly claim to occupy the same now. They may exchange signals, they may influence each other, but their internal clocks are drifting apart, quietly and continuously. This drift is not a flaw, it is a feature, and it leads to a deeply strange consequence. Imagine a region near an extremely massive object. Time there flows much more slowly than it does here. From inside that region, nothing feels wrong. Conversations unfold normally. Days pass as expected. Life feels continuous. But from your perspective, watching from afar, everything there appears slowed down. Movements stretch, processes crawl. A single gesture might take years. Now imagine the reverse, a region far removed from mass, where time flows faster than it does near Earth. From there, the universe appears lethargic. Events elsewhere lag behind. Changes feel delayed. Neither observer is privileged. Neither perspective is more real. They are simply separated by gravity's grip on time. This is where the second drop settles in. If gravity creates temporal depth, then the universe is not synchronized even at rest. Two regions can be motionless relative to each other and still experience different rates of time. This breaks one of our deepest assumptions. We often believe that if nothing is moving, if everything is stable, then time should agree. But gravity does not care about motion alone. It cares about mass. And mass is unevenly distributed, which means time is unevenly distributed. Now, let us drift a little further, because this does not only affect distant stars, it affects observation itself. Light leaving a massive object must climb out of a gravitational well. As it does, it loses energy. Its frequency shifts, its message changes, and its timing changes too. By the time that light reaches you, it carries the imprint of the time it passed through. You are not seeing the star as it is. You are seeing the star as it was, filtered through distorted time. This means every observation is already shaped by gravity before it reaches your eyes. The universe does not send you clean data. It sends you warped stories. This is where the twist deepens. Because if gravity alters time, and time alters observation, then your picture of reality is never neutral. It is always biased by where you stand in the gravitational landscape. There is no view from nowhere, only views from somewhere. And that somewhere determines how fast the universe appears to move. This realization does something subtle to the idea of truth. It does not destroy it, but it localizes it. What is true here, now, under this gravity, is not necessarily true there, now, under another. Truth becomes conditional, contextual, bound to place. Now feel how this begins to soften the edges of certainty. We want the universe to be clean, to operate under a single clock, to offer one definitive present moment that everything shares. But gravity refuses this simplicity. It fragments time gently, patiently, everywhere. And the universe does not rush to fix it. Instead, it lets regions drift apart in tempo, each following its own rhythm. This is not chaos. It is orchestration without a conductor. Each mass plays its own timing. Each region keeps its own beat, and there is no requirement that they align. This brings us to a quiet tension we rarely acknowledge. If time flows differently near different masses, then the very idea of when becomes unstable on cosmic scales. Events cannot be cleanly ordered across the universe. Before and after lose their universal meaning. They only make sense locally. Here, under this gravity, within this temporal well, beyond it, ordering becomes ambiguous. This is why the universe feels so vast, not just in distance, but in timing. You are not separated from distant stars merely by space. You are separated by the pace at which reality unfolds there. You are not sharing a moment with them. You are intercepting a message from their past, shaped by gravity, stretched by time, delayed by distance. And yet, despite all this fragmentation, your experience feels continuous, unified, present. This is the marvel. Not that the universe is uneven, but that consciousness manages to feel smooth within it. Mind builds a stable now from inputs that are fundamentally out of sync. It stitches together delayed signals, distorted timings, gravitational biases, and produces coherence. This is not because reality is simple. It is because perception is adaptive. And here, gently, we approach the edge of something important. If gravity sculpts time and perception smooths it, then now is not a feature of the universe. It is a feature of awareness. The universe does not offer a present moment. The mind assembles one, and this assembly is fragile. It works only within a narrow range of conditions where gravity is moderate, Motion is slow, and delays are small enough to ignore. Step outside that range, and the illusion begins to unravel. This is why extreme environments feel so alien. Near massive objects, near immense energies, near the edges of physics itself, time behaves too strangely for intuition to survive intact. And so we retreat. We focus on our small region, our local flow, our manageable now. It's indifferent. But even here, gravity is quietly at work, bending time just enough to remind us that the present moment is not a universal gift. It is a local compromise. Let that idea rest gently. Because once we accept that gravity shapes time, the next question arrives naturally, almost inevitably. If every region of space has its own tempo, if gravity fractures the present into countless local nows, then how does the universe ever appear coherent at all? How do these asynchronous regions communicate? How does information cross from one temporal flow to another? And what happens to meaning when messages arrive out of time? That is where we are drifting next. Hold the image of gravity pulling not just matter, but moments themselves. Because the next step is not about time slowing down. It is about what happens when different nows try to speak to each other. The sky is not a window, it is an archive. When you look upward, the instinct is to believe you are witnessing what exists out there. Right now, stars burning, galaxies drifting, nebulae glowing in real time. The darkness feels immediate. The points of light feel present. It feels as though the universe is unfolding in front of you, synchronized with your breath. But the sky is not showing you what is. It is showing you what was, and not all from the same moment. Every direction you turn, your eyes becomes a different page in a museum of asynchronous pasts. Some displays are recent, others are impossibly ancient, and none of them agree on what time it is. This is where the illusion of a shared present finally gives way. Light does not carry the present forward. It carries the past outward, and it does so unevenly. A nearby star sends you a message that is only a few years old. A more distant one sends you a message that began its journey before your grandparents were born. A galaxy at the edge of visibility sends you light that left when Earth was still cooling, when life had not yet learned how to breathe. They all arrive together, not because they belong together, but because distance has sorted them by delay. This is the first quiet fall. When you gaze at the night sky, you are not standing inside a single moment. You are standing at the intersection of millions of different times, all arriving late, all pretending to be now. 6. The universe does not correct this illusion for you. It lets you believe it, because believing it is easier than facing what the sky truly is. A layered record, a time-lapse stretched across unimaginable scales, a museum where no two exhibits share the same date. Now let us lift gently, because this is not a flaw in observation. It is a consequence of how information moves. Light has a finite speed. It does not rush to keep your perception tidy. It travels patiently, indifferent to meaning. Every photon you see tonight began its journey long before you decided to look up. And once you accept that, something subtle changes in how you understand presence. The present moment stops being something you see. It becomes something you infer. You assume that what you are seeing corresponds to what exists now. But the universe has never promised that correspondence. It offers you signals, delayed and distorted, and leaves your mind to assemble a story that feels coherent. This assembly works beautifully at human scales. Delays are small. The differences are negligible. Your surroundings cooperate, but the sky does not cooperate. It refuses to compress itself into your sense of time, and so it reveals a deeper truth. There is no single cosmic snapshot, only accumulated histories. Each star is a fossil, each galaxy a memory. Some are fresh, some are ancient, some are echoes of structures that no longer exist in any meaningful sense. Yet all of them shine as if they were alive now. This creates a strange inversion. The farther away something is, the younger it appears. The closer something is, the older it feels. Distance becomes time. Space becomes chronology. And the universe quietly rearranges your intuition. This is where the next drop settles in. If what you see is always the past, then observation is not neutral. It is archaeological. Every glance into the sky is an excavation. You are not witnessing events. You are uncovering evidence. And like all evidence, it is incomplete. Some events have already happened but have not yet announced themselves to you. Others are announcing themselves long after they are gone. The sky is full of things that are no longer there, and empty of things that already exist. This is not a paradox. It is the natural outcome of finite speed. And it means something quietly unsettling. There are events happening right now, real, violent, transformative events that you cannot see yet. Supernovae exploding, stars collapsing, worlds forming, civilizations, perhaps, flickering into existence and fading out again. They are real. They are happening, but they are not part of your present, not yet. And some never will be, because the universe is expanding, because distance grows, because some messages will never reach you at all. This is where the museum becomes stranger. Not every exhibit is destined to be displayed. Some histories will remain unseen forever, not because they were insignificant, but because the universe has grown too large for their light to arrive. The archive is incomplete by design. Now let us lift again, because this does not only apply to distant galaxies, it applies to everything. Even the light reflecting off the walls around you is delayed. The sound of this voice reaches you after it has already been spoken. Your awareness lags behind reality by fractions of a second, constantly playing catch-up. Your present moment is already a reconstruction, and your brain is very good at hiding this fact. It smooths over delays, it aligns signals, it edits out gaps, it creates the sensation of immediacy by ignoring the truth. But when you look at the sky, the delays become too large to hide. Millions of years cannot be edited away, and so the illusion cracks. This is the conflict we rarely articulate. We want to believe we are witnessing the universe as it is, but we are always witnessing the universe as it was, and as it was at many different times simultaneously. The sky is not synchronized. It is a chorus of mismatched voices, each singing from a different moment, arriving together only because of how far they had to travel. This raises a quiet, unsettling question. If the universe we see is always out of date, then what does it mean to understand it? We build models, we draw maps, we describe structures, but these descriptions are always slightly behind reality. Sometimes slightly, sometimes catastrophically. We are always late. And yet, understanding still emerges. Because meaning does not require immediacy. It requires pattern. The universe does not need to be seen now to be known. It needs to be seen consistently. And so science learns to work with delay. It treats the sky as a record, not a report. It reads structure in the arrangement of fossils. It reconstructs processes from the shapes they left behind. But this reconstruction has limits. Because when time is uneven, when observation is delayed, when gravity distorts signals and expansion stretches distance, certainty becomes fragile. We are always interpreting, never witnessing directly. This is where the next twist arrives. The sky is not lying to you, but it is not telling you the truth you think it is telling. It is not saying, "This is what exists now," end quote. It is saying, "This is what has existed," end quote. And the difference matters. When you mistake the archive for the present, you begin to ask the wrong questions. You wonder why things look stable when they are not, why the universe appears calm when it is full of violence, why change feels slow when it is often sudden. The answer is delay. The universe has already moved on. You are catching up. This realization subtly reframes urgency. We often feel pressure to keep pace with time, as if we are falling behind some cosmic schedule. But the universe itself is not waiting for us. It is not synchronized. It is not aligned. It is not counting seconds the way we do. It is unfolding asynchronously, and we are sampling it through a narrow temporal window, always offset, always incomplete. This can feel unsettling, but it can also feel relieving, because if the universe does not share a single present, then it is not demanding one from you. You are not required to be up to date with everything. You cannot be. No one can. Presence becomes local. Meaning becomes local. Your now matters where you are, not everywhere. This thought lifts us gently, because it suggests that being out of sync is not a failure. It is the default condition of existence. Stars are out of sync with galaxies. Galaxies are out of sync with clusters. Clusters are out of sync with the cosmic expansion itself. Everything is misaligned in time, and yet, structure emerges, patterns form, beauty persists. This tells us something important. Synchronization is not required for coherence. The universe does not need a shared present to function. It needs only interaction signals crossing, influences propagating, histories overlapping just enough to shape one another. The sky, then, is not a static museum. It is a living archive, one that continues to grow, even as parts of it fade beyond reach. Every night, new exhibits arrive. Ancient light reaches you for the first time. Histories you never knew existed quietly announce themselves. And every night, countless other histories slip away, never to be seen. This is the quiet imbalance of observation. You are always gaining access to some pasts and losing access to others, and there is nothing you can do about it. Now, let this thought settle, because once we accept that the sky is an archive of asynchronous pasts, another question naturally follows. If everything we see is delayed, if every signal arrives late, if every observation is already history, then how does the universe ever feel alive? Why does reality feel immediate at all? Why does the present moment feel so convincing, so vivid, so now despite everything being out of date? The answer does not lie in the sky. It lies in you, in how perception stitches together delay and calls it experience. And that is where we are drifting next. Because to understand why the present feels real, we must ask a deeper question. Not about stars, not about light, but about whether now exists anywhere at all. Does now exist anywhere at all? The question sounds innocent at first, almost playful. It feels like something you could ask late at night, half curious, half tired, expecting a clever answer that reassures you everything is still in order. Surely, now exists. You are here. You are listening. This moment feels unmistakably present. But the universe has been quietly dismantling that certainty. Once you accept that time flows unevenly, that gravity reshapes its pace, and that the sky is an archive of asynchronous pasts, the idea of a universal now begins to lose its footing. It becomes difficult to point to any place and say, with confidence, this is the present moment of the universe, because every place answers differently. Here is the first gentle fall. Now feels real because it feels immediate. But immediacy is not the same thing as simultaneity. Immediacy is a sensation. Simultaneity is a condition, and the universe offers very little of the latter. You feel present because signals arrive close together. Your senses receive information with delays small enough to ignore. Your brain merges them into a seamless experience and calls it now. But this merging is an act of compression, not a reflection of reality. Reality does not compress itself for you. It spreads, it delays, it drifts, and it does so differently everywhere. Were to stand on another planet, under a different gravitational field, moving at a different velocity, your now would already be misaligned with the one you inhabit here. The difference might be tiny, or it might be enormous. But it would exist, and it would be permanent. This is where the idea of a shared present quietly collapses. Because if two observers cannot agree on what is happening now, even in principle, then now is not a global feature of the universe. It is a local construction, valid only within a limited region of space and motion. A neighborhood, not a constant. Now let us lift slightly. Because this does not mean now is meaningless. It means now is situated. It belongs to a frame of reference, a set of conditions, a particular flow of time shaped by gravity and movement. Within that frame, now works beautifully. Clocks agree. Experiences align. Life feels coherent. Step outside that frame, and agreement fades. This is not a failure of physics. It is a consequence of it. The universe does not provide a master timeline that everything must follow. Instead, it offers countless local timelines, each internally consistent, each drifting relative to the others. This is why physics does not ask, "What is happening now in the universe?" Is read. It asks, "What is happening relative to whom?" End quote. And this shift in questioning matters, because when you remove the assumption of a universal present, time stops behaving like a stage on which events unfold. It becomes something more intimate, something relational. Time becomes the measure of change as experienced from within a system, not an external clock ticking independently of everything else. This is the second fall. If time is relational, then now is not something you occupy. It is something you participate in. You share it only with what is close enough, similar enough, and synchronized enough to remain within the same temporal flow. Beyond that, the concept dissolves. And yet, your mind resists this idea. It wants a present moment that extends outward. It wants to believe that somewhere beyond the stars, there is a cosmic now, unfolding in perfect alignment, a universal instant that everything shares. But this desire is emotional, not physical. It is rooted in how consciousness evolved. A shared present is useful. It allows coordination. It allows prediction. It allows survival. Brains that assumed synchronization worked better than brains that constantly questioned it. So evolution rewarded the illusion. Your mind treats now as absolute because it needs to. But the universe does not share that need, and so a quiet tension forms between experience and reality. Experience insists, "This is happening now." Reality replies, "Only here." Now let us drift. Imagine, for a moment, trying to locate now without referring to yourself. Not your senses, not your position, not your motion. Strip away the observer entirely. Where would you point? You cannot say here because there is no here. You cannot say this moment because moments require clocks. You cannot say everywhere because time does not agree everywhere. The question loses its anchor. Now, without an observer, has no meaning. This is deeply unsettling because it suggests something we rarely confront. The present moment may not exist independently of perception, not in the way we think. This does not mean reality depends on consciousness. The universe existed long before minds appeared. Events unfolded. Stars formed. Galaxies collided. Time flowed. But now is not the same as time. Now is the experience of alignment. It is what happens when changes line up closely enough to feel simultaneous. And this alignment is local, fragile, temporary. This is where the next twist arrives. If now is a local alignment rather than a universal condition, then the present moment is constantly being rebuilt. It is not something you step into and remain inside. It is something your mind assembles over and over again. From signals that are always slightly out of date, you are not standing in the present. You are reconstructing it, moment by moment. Your brain takes delayed information, light, sound, touch, and compresses it into a coherent slice. It edits out inconsistencies. It smooths timing differences, chooses a window of tolerance, and calls everything inside that window now. This window is narrow. Milliseconds, perhaps, enough to feel immediate, enough to feel real, but it is still a compromise. And the universe does not operate within that window. It operates across ranges of time so vast that the idea of a single present becomes meaningless. This is why the present moment feels so vivid and yet so elusive. You can never hold on to it. The instant you try to name it, it slips into memory. By the time you think now, the signals that made you think it have already passed. Now is always late. And this lateness is not a bug. It is a feature of awareness. Now let us lift again. Because once you accept that now is constructed, something unexpected happens. The pressure to find it disappears. You no longer need to chase the present moment, to grasp it, to anchor yourself inside it. You realize that it is not a place you can inhabit permanently. It is a process, continuously refreshed, continuously dissolving, and this realization softens urgency. It loosens the grip of time anxiety. You are not failing to be present. Presence is fleeting by nature. It flickers. It reforms. It exists just long enough to be experienced, then gives way to the next reconstruction. The universe does not offer you a stable present. It offers you a stream of approximations, and your mind turns those approximations into life. This is the quiet reconciliation between physics and experience. Physics tells you that simultaneity is relative, that time is uneven, that now cannot be universal. Experience tells you that the present moment feels undeniably real. Both are correct. They are speaking at different scales. At the scale of neurons and senses, now works. It keeps you alive. It lets you move, respond, and connect. At the scale of stars and galaxies, now dissolves into a patchwork of local frames, each unaware of the others, except through delayed signals. Neither scale invalidates the other. They coexist, but they do not merge. And here is the deeper twist, because once you see now as local and constructed, you begin to notice how easily it shifts, how your sense of presence changes with attention, emotion, and state of consciousness. Time feels different when you are anxious, different when you are calm, different when you are focused, different when you are drifting toward sleep. The present moment stretches and compresses, not because the universe changes, but because the window your mind uses to assemble now changes. This means the present is not just local in space. It is local in mind. Your now at this moment is not the same now you experienced earlier today, even if the clocks agree. The window has shifted, the alignment has changed, and so now becomes something deeply personal. Not subjective in the sense of imaginary, but subjective in the sense of situated. This reframes a question we often ask. We ask how to stay present, as if the present were a place you could fall out of. But perhaps the present is something you continually recreate. Perhaps attention is not about staying inside now, but about how you assemble it. This thought carries us towards something quieter. Because if the present moment is always a reconstruction, always slightly delayed, always local and fragile, then it does not need to be perfect. It does not need to capture everything. It does not need to extend everywhere. It only needs to be enough. Enough to experience, enough to feel, enough to exist within your current. The universe does not ask more of you than that, and it does not offer more than that either. Now let this idea settle, because once we stop treating now as a universal truth, a strange new perspective opens. We begin to see that we are not failing to keep up with time. Time itself is fragmented, uneven, distributed across countless local flows, and our present moment is simply the one we happen to be drifting through. This realization prepares us for the next step, because if now is local, constructed, and fragile, then the universe we experience is not just out of sync in space, it is out of sync within us. And to understand that, we must look at how we live inside multiple timelines at once. Not metaphorically, literally. That is where we are going next. Living inside more than one timeline at once, not symbolically, not poetically, literally. This is not something you notice easily because the timelines overlap so smoothly that they feel like one. But once you begin to pay attention to how experience actually forms, the seams start to appear. Subtle at first, then unmistakable. Every moment you experience is an intersection. Signals arrive from different sources, traveling at different speeds, shaped by different paths, delayed by different amounts of time. Your senses do not receive reality all at once. They receive fragments, visual information lagging behind touch, sound trailing behind motion, internal states responding after the body has already changed. And yet, you feel unified. This is the marvel. Not that time is uneven, but that awareness makes it feel even. Here is the first fall. Your experience of now is not a single stream. It is a convergence. Light reaches your eyes after traveling through space. Sound reaches your ears after compressing air. Touch registers only after pressure activates receptors. Internal sensations lag even further behind chemical changes. Thought itself arrives late, trailing the neural activity that produced it. These delays are small, milliseconds, fractions of a second, but they are real, and they do not align perfectly, which means that even at the scale of your own body, events are not happening simultaneously. You are always slightly out of sync with yourself. Your brain knows this, and it compensates. It builds a narrative that smooths timing differences into a single experience. It aligns signals that never truly arrived together and calls the result the present moment. End quote. This alignment is not passive. It is active work, and it never stops. Now, let us lift. Because this process does not only happen within you, it happens between you and the world. Every object you perceive exists in its own temporal context. Light reflecting off a surface carries information from a moment that has already passed. Motion you observe has already occurred by the time you see it. Even the words you are hearing now were spoken before you became aware of them. Your present moment is always reconstructed from the immediate past, and it is reconstructed constantly. This means you are not living inside a single timeline. You are living at the crossroads of many. A timeline of neural processing, a timeline of sensory transmission, a timeline of physical events, a timeline of memory formation, all of them overlapping, none of them perfectly aligned. And yet, you experience continuity. This is where the second fall deepens. Continuity is not given. It is produced. Your mind stitches together asynchronous inputs and creates the feeling of flow. It hides the fractures. It erases the lag. It presents a seamless narrative that feels like a single unfolding present. But the seams are still there. You just do not feel them until something disrupts the stitching. Fatigue, stress, altered states, moments when time feels distorted, when seconds stretch or collapse, when events feel disconnected, when awareness drifts. These are not malfunctions. They are glimpses of how fragile the construction is. They reveal that your sense of time depends on coordination, and coordination depends on alignment. When alignment loosens, time fractures. Now let us drift further. Because this fragmentation does not stop at the boundaries of the body. You also live inside social timelines. The pace of conversation, the rhythm of shared attention, the subtle synchronization of gestures, pauses, expressions. When these align, interaction feels effortless. When they do not, discomfort arises, misunderstanding, awkwardness, a sense of being out of sync. It's provid brainsy. This is not just metaphor. It is temporal. You are trying to align your internal timing with someone else's. Sometimes it works, sometimes it does not. And when it fails, the present moment fractures again. You feel delayed, or rushed, or disconnected. This suggests something quietly profound. Now is not only local to place, it is local to relationship. You share a present moment only with what is synchronized closely enough to overlap with your own temporal flow. Everything else exists at a slight offset. Now imagine scaling this up. Beyond individuals, beyond conversations, beyond societies, entire regions of the universe are operating on different temporal rhythms, not just because of distance, but because of gravity, motion, and energy distribution. They are not sharing your now. It's sovereignty now. They cannot. The delays are too large. The flow's too different, which means that just as you live inside multiple timelines within your own experience, the universe itself is a vast superposition of timelines, overlapping without ever fully aligning. This is the next lift, because this perspective dissolves a common fear, the fear of being behind. We often feel as though we are lagging behind time, missing moments, failing to keep up with some invisible schedule. But if existence itself is asynchronous, then being out of sync is not a failure. It is the default state. Nothing is fully aligned. Nothing ever was. The universe does not move together. It overlaps. It intersects. It brushes past itself at different speeds. And meaning arises not from synchronization, but from interaction across differences. Now comes the twist. If you are always living inside multiple timelines, then your identity is not anchored to a single now. End quote. You are not a point on a line. You are a pattern, sustained across delays. Your sense of self persists, not because moments align perfectly, but because your mind bridges gaps. It carries memory forward. It anticipates future states. It holds continuity together across fractures. You exist across time, not within a single instant. This reframes something fundamental. We often ask who we are now, as if identity were tied to a moment. But identity is temporal. It stretches. It accumulates. It survives misalignment. You are not present. You are persistent. And this persistence is what allows you to function inside an uneven universe. Now, let us slow down, because this realization carries a quieter implication. If awareness is built from overlapping timelines, then consciousness itself may be a response to temporal fragmentation, a way to navigate misalignment, a tool for coherence in a universe that does not offer it freely. Consciousness does not eliminate delay. It manages it. It does not synchronize the universe. It synchronizes experience enough to survive. This suggests that awareness did not emerge despite uneven time. It emerged because of it. In a universe where everything unfolded in perfect simultaneity, there would be no need for interpretation, anticipation, or memory. Events would align effortlessly. There would be no uncertainty, no delay, no fragmentation to bridge. Consciousness would have nothing to do. But this is not the universe we inhabit. We inhabit one where signals arrive late, where flows differ, where alignment is temporary and local. In such a universe, awareness becomes essential. It allows systems to integrate incomplete information and act as if coherence exists. This is not speculation. It is adaptation. Now feel how this shifts the narrative. Time is not something that happens to consciousness. Consciousness is something that happens because of time's unevenness. This does not mean consciousness is caused by time alone, but it means time's structure shapes how awareness must function. It must smooth, integrate, predict, and compensate, and it does this continuously. Even now, even as you listen, your mind is aligning this voice with memory, expectation, and sensation, constructing a present moment that feels whole. But beneath that wholeness, the timelines remain layered. Now let us drift toward a deeper quiet, because once you see that you live inside multiple timelines, another idea becomes unavoidable. If awareness depends on managing delay, then the present moment is not the goal. It is the interface, a temporary workspace where fragments meet. And like any interface, it is limited. It shows you what you need, not everything that exists. This is why the present moment feels rich but incomplete, vivid but fleeting, solid but impossible to hold. It is doing its job. And its job is not to reveal the universe as it truly is. It is to allow you to function within it. This realization gently releases a pressure we often carry, the pressure to be fully present, fully aware, fully aligned. But full alignment is not available. It never was. Even at rest, even in stillness, even in silence, your experience is assembled from delays. Presence is approximation, and approximation is enough. Now let this settle, because the next step will take us deeper into the mechanics of delay itself. Not just how it shapes awareness, but how it defines what you can know. Because if you are always living inside overlapping timelines, if every experience is already slightly behind reality, then there is a question we can no longer avoid. Are you ever experiencing events as they happen? Or are you always arriving after the fact? That is where we are drifting next, toward the quiet space between event and awareness, where time reveals one of its most subtle secrets. Every event reaches you late, not dramatically late, not noticeably late, just late enough that it changes everything. The delay is so small, so familiar, that your mind has learned to ignore it. It treats arrival as occurrence. It treats awareness as presence. It collapses the distance between what happens and what you know into a single sensation and calls it experience. But that collapse is an illusion, Because between every event and your awareness of it, there is a gap, a narrow one, a quiet one, and it never closes. This is the first fall. You never experience an event as it happens. You experience it as it arrives. Light must travel, sound must propagate, nerves must transmit signals, the brain must process them, thought must form, meaning must be assembled. Only then does something feel real to you. By the time you notice anything at all, the event that caused it is already over. Always. There is no exception. Even the sensation of your own body is delayed. By the time you feel your breath, the muscles have already moved. By the time you feel your heartbeat, the contraction has already passed. By the time you think a thought, the neural activity that produced it has already occurred. You are always arriving after the fact, and the universe does not apologize for this. Now let us lift gently, because this delay is not a defect, it is a boundary condition. Reality does not wait to be perceived. It unfolds according to its own processes, indifferent to awareness. Perception is something that catches up, not something that keeps pace. The universe moves first. You follow. This is true at every scale. A lightning strike happens before you see it. A sound exists before you hear it. A star explodes long before its light reaches your eyes. A thought arises before you become aware of thinking it. In every case, awareness trails reality, and this trailing defines your entire experience. This is not something you can correct. No amount of attention, mindfulness, or focus can eliminate the gap. You can narrow it slightly. You can become more sensitive, but you cannot arrive on time, because time itself is the reason you arrive at all. Now let us drift. Imagine, for a moment, a universe where awareness was instantaneous, where perception and event were perfectly synchronized, where the moment something happened, it was known. In such a universe, there would be no delay, no uncertainty, no anticipation, no memory. Everything would be immediate, fully revealed, and already complete. This might sound ideal, but it would be uninhabitable. Without delay, there is no room for interpretation, no space for response, no buffer in which choice can form. Awareness would be overwhelmed, flooded by raw occurrence with no time to integrate or act. Delay is not an obstacle to consciousness. It is what makes consciousness possible. This is the next lift. The gap between event and awareness is not empty. It is active. It is where meaning forms. It is where interpretation happens. It is where the mind predicts, fills in, and prepares. The delay gives you time not in the sense of duration, but in the sense of opportunity, a space to respond rather than merely react. And yet, this same delay creates a subtle illusion, because when awareness consistently arrives late, it begins to mistake arrival for occurrence. It feels as though you are witnessing reality unfold in real time, even though you are always one step behind. This is the quiet deception built into perception, not a lie, a convenience, and it shapes how you understand truth. You believe that what you are aware of is what is happening. What you are aware of is what has already happened. Now let us fall again, because this delay does not remain constant. It stretches and compresses. Under stress, awareness narrows. The gap feels smaller, sharper, more immediate. Time seems to slow because the brain processes more information per unit of physical time. Under fatigue, awareness lags. The gap widens, reactions slow. Events feel distant, muffled, slightly out of reach. Under calm, the gap becomes smooth, unnoticed. The world feels gentle, continuous, manageable. Your experience of time is shaped not by the universe alone, but by how your awareness navigates delay. And this navigation is not perfect. It relies on prediction. Your brain is constantly guessing what will happen next, using patterns from the past to anticipate the immediate future. These predictions fill the gap created by delay. They allow you to act as if you are present, even when you are not. This is why you can catch a falling object, why you can follow a moving face, why you can respond quickly to danger. You are not reacting to the present. You are acting on a prediction of what the present will be by the time you respond. this is where the twist sharpens. Your experience of now is partly a forecast. The present moment you feel is not a snapshot of reality. It is a projection, a model of what is likely happening based on delayed information and expectation. This model is usually accurate enough, but it is never exact, which means that even your most immediate experiences contain a trace of the future as imagined by the past. You are living in a temporal blend, memory, prediction, and delayed perception fused into something that feels like immediacy. This is not a flaw. It is an adaptation to an asynchronous universe. Now let us lift again, because this reframes a deep human concern. We often feel that we are missing the present moment, that life is slipping past us too quickly, that we are always behind. But this feeling is not a personal failure. It is a structural feature of awareness. You cannot catch up to reality. No one can. Reality does not slow down to be experienced. Experience is what happens when delayed signals, prediction, and interpretation briefly align. That alignment is fragile, momentary, and enough. This understanding softens the anxiety of lateness. You are not late to your life. Your life is happening exactly where awareness can meet it. Now let us drift further outward, because the gap between event and awareness does not exist only within individuals. It exists between regions of the universe. Signals crossing vast distances arrive with enormous delays. Entire histories unfold before their consequences are felt elsewhere. The universe is full of events that have already happened but have not yet been experienced by anyone else. This means the universe itself lives with delay, not just observers. Reality is constantly ahead of awareness everywhere. There is no place where awareness and event coincide perfectly. Not on Earth, not near stars, not near black holes, nowhere. This dissolves a comforting idea, the idea that somewhere, somehow, there exists a privileged frame where reality is known as it happens. There is no such place. Even hypothetical observers experience delay, because information must travel, because time must pass, because awareness is always downstream of events. This brings us to a quiet, unsettling clarity. There is no vantage point from which the universe is fully present, not even to itself. The universe does not observe itself in real time. It unfolds, and only later are parts of it known. This is where the next twist becomes unavoidable. If awareness always arrives after events, then knowledge is always historical, even knowledge of the present. You never know what is. You only know what was interpreted in light of what you expect will be. This does not make knowledge useless. It makes it probabilistic, contextual, always provisional. Now, let us slow the pace, because this realization carries a subtle emotional weight. If you are always arriving late, then the present moment is never fully yours. It is always slipping away as you reach for it. This can feel like loss, but it can also feel like freedom, because if the present cannot be held, then there is no need to grasp it. You cannot miss what cannot be captured. Cannot fail to be present in a moment that does not exist independently. Presence is not a state you achieve. It is a relationship you maintain with delay. This relationship can be gentle, patient, forgiving. You do not need to eliminate the gap. You only need to navigate it. Now feel how this idea changes the tone of existence. Life is not a race to keep up with reality. It is a continuous negotiation with lateness, a graceful acceptance that awareness always trails behind events, and that meaning emerges in that trailing space. This reframes urgency. It reframes regret. It reframes the fear of missing out. Nothing is happening exactly now in the way you imagine. Everything is already becoming something else, and you are always meeting it just in time to experience it. Now let this settle, because once you accept that awareness arrives after events, another question arises naturally. If we are always late, if the present moment is always reconstructed, if experience is always downstream of reality, then what does it mean to say that something is happening now in the universe? And more importantly, What does it mean to live well inside a reality that never waits? That question does not ask for an answer yet. It asks for patience. Because the next step will take us from delay to dissonance, from lateness to misalignment, toward the places where time runs so differently that entire lives pass between signals, and where the gap between event and awareness grows so large that synchronization becomes impossible. That is where we are drifting next. There are places in the universe where time barely moves, not metaphorically, not as a figure of speech, but in a way that can be measured, predicted, and calculated, places where seconds stretch into something almost unrecognizable, where change slows to a near standstill compared to the flow you experience here. These places do not announce themselves with silence. They announce themselves with gravity. This is the first fall. When mass becomes extreme, time does not break. It thickens. It resists motion. It stretches moments until they lose their familiar shape. Near certain objects, dense remnants of collapsed stars, regions where gravity folds space inward, time flows so slowly that what feels like a brief interval there can correspond to years, centuries, even millions of years elsewhere. And from inside those regions, nothing feels wrong. This is what makes the idea so difficult to grasp. Life, if it could exist there, would feel normal. Thoughts would form at their usual pace. Memories would accumulate steadily. Cause and effect would remain intact. Nothing inside that slow-moving region would feel frozen or delayed. But from the outside, everything would appear suspended, as if caught in amber. Now let us lift gently. Because this is not speculation, physics predicts this behavior with precision. The stronger the gravitational field, the slower time flows relative to regions farther away. Near extreme objects, this effect becomes overwhelming. Time stretches until it nearly stops, asymptotically approaching stillness without ever fully reaching it. There is no boundary where time switches off, only a gradual thickening, moment by moment. This creates a deeply strange possibility. There could be regions of the universe where time has barely progressed since the early stages of cosmic history. Places that are, in a very real sense, still living in what we would call the distant past. Not because they are far away, but because their clocks have hardly moved. Now let this idea settle. Because once you accept it, the universe changes shape in your mind. It is no longer a place where everything ages together. It is a place where aging itself is uneven, where some regions rush forward, burning through their histories quickly, while others linger, suspended in extended moments. This is the second fall. If time flows millions of years slower in certain regions, then entire epochs of the universe could pass elsewhere while almost nothing changes there. Stars could form and die far away, while a single slow heartbeat unfolds nearby. This means that the age of the universe is not a single number, it is a range. It depends on where you ask the question. Here, the universe is billions of years old. Elsewhere, it may feel far younger, not because history is missing, because time itself has been reluctant to move. Now let us drift. Imagine, for a moment, a hypothetical civilization existing deep within such a slow time region. To them, their world feels stable. Their science advances gradually. Their culture evolves at a comfortable pace. They have no reason to believe anything unusual is happening. But from your perspective, watching from afar, their entire civilization is unfolding in slow motion. Their wars last centuries. Their discoveries take millennia. Their extinction, if it comes, stretches across spans of time so long that it feels almost static. You might watch their entire history play out as if you were watching a glacier move. And yet, from their point of view, nothing is slow. This asymmetry is not philosophical, it is physical, and it introduces a quiet but devastating consequence. Synchronization between such regions is impossible. No shared present can exist between flows that differ so radically. Messages sent from fast regions arrive too quickly to be meaningful. Messages sent from slow regions arrive too late to matter. Communication collapses, not because of distance, but because of time. This is where the twist deepens. We often imagine the universe as lonely because of space, the vast distances separating stars and galaxies. But space may not be the greatest barrier. Time may be. Even if two civilizations were close in space, if they existed in regions with radically different temporal flow, they would be invisible to one another in practice. One would appear frozen, the other would appear fleeting. They would never meet, not because they are far apart, but because they are living in different speeds of reality. Now let us lift again, because this reframes cosmic isolation. Loneliness in the universe may not be about distance, it may be about tempo. The universe may be filled with activity that never intersects because its rhythms are incompatible. Entire regions unfolding too slowly or too quickly to ever meaningfully overlap. This suggests a universe that is not empty, but out of sync. A universe where coexistence does not guarantee interaction. And here, something subtle shifts in how we understand existence. We often measure significance by duration. Longer-lived structures feel more important. Short-lived ones feel fragile. But in a universe with uneven time, duration itself becomes relative. A civilization that lasts 1,000,000 years in a fast-time region may experience less internal time than a civilization that lasts a few hours in a slow-time region. Which one is older? Which one is more enduring? The question loses clarity. Age becomes local. Persistence becomes contextual. This is the next fall. When time is uneven, comparison becomes meaningless beyond local frames. You cannot rank experiences by length alone. You cannot judge significance by how long something lasted from the outside. Meaning collapses inward. It becomes something that exists only within a given temporal flow. Now let us drift deeper. Because this idea does not stop at hypothetical civilizations. It reaches into the core of how the universe evolves. Regions where time flows slowly preserve conditions. They resist change. They act as reservoirs of earlier states. Regions where time flows quickly burn through possibilities rapidly, evolving and transforming at an accelerated pace. The universe, then, is not evolving uniformly. It is evolving at different speeds in different places. Some regions race toward complexity, others linger near simplicity. This creates a patchwork cosmos where different eras coexist spatially, not just temporally. The past is not behind us, it is elsewhere. This realization is both unsettling and strangely comforting, because it means that nothing is ever fully lost. Earlier states of the universe may still exist not as memories, but as ongoing realities unfolding slowly in hidden corners of space-time. The universe does not discard its past. It redistributes it. Now comes the lift, because this perspective softens the idea of finality. Death, decay, extinction, these feel absolute when time is uniform. But when time flows unevenly, endings become relative. A structure that appears finished from one frame may still be unfolding from another. This does not erase loss, but it complicates it. It suggests that existence is not synchronized enough for universal conclusions. What is over here may still be ongoing elsewhere. This reframes hope, not as optimism, but as acknowledgement of complexity. Now let us pause gently, because this line of thought brings us to a delicate tension. If there are regions where time flows millions of years slower, then the universe contains places that are, effectively, trapped in the past, not by force, but by physics. They are not choosing to remain behind. They simply cannot keep pace with the rest of reality. This raises a quiet question. Is progress meaningful in a universe without shared time? If advancement occurs at different rates everywhere, then ahead and behind lose their meaning beyond local frames. This applies not only to civilizations, but to you. You often feel as though you should be further along, older, wiser, more accomplished by now. You compare your internal timeline to external markers and feel misaligned. But the universe itself offers no standard pace. It does not demand that anything keep up. It does not enforce a schedule. It allows regions and lives to unfold at their own speed. This is not permission. It is reality. Now let us drift toward the edge of this chapter. Because once we accept that time can run millions of years slower in some regions, another question emerges naturally. What happens in regions where time runs faster? If slow time regions preserve the past, what do fast time regions do to existence? What kind of realities emerge where moments burn quickly, where entire histories unfold before slower regions can even respond? That is where the asymmetry sharpens. Because time does not only slow, it also accelerates. And acceleration carries its own consequences. Hold that thought. Let the image of slow-moving time settle like a deep, heavy current. Because the next step will pull us into faster waters, places where existence rushes forward so quickly that even awareness struggles to keep up, and where life, if it exists, may flicker like a brief spark against an unrelenting flow. That is where we are drifting next. There are regions of the universe where time does not linger. It rushes, not chaotically, not violently, but with a quiet urgency that leaves little room for pause. In these places, moments pass lightly, almost weightlessly, slipping away before they can gather, meaning the way they do here. If slow time regions feel like deep currents where everything is suspended, fast time regions feel like thin streams, clear, swift, and unforgiving. This is the first fall, where gravity loosens its grip, where mass thins out and space-time relaxes. Time does not thicken, it accelerates. Seconds there contain less duration than seconds here. Processes complete more quickly. Change happens faster. Aging, decay, growth, everything unfolds at a sharper pace. From inside such a region, life still feels normal. Thoughts form, days pass, history accumulates, nothing feels hurried. Because experience always calibrates itself to its own flow. But from the outside, something strange appears. Entire lives can unfold while you are barely watching. Now let us lift gently, because this is not simply the inverse of slow time regions. Fast time is not just more of the same. It introduces a different kind of fragility. When time flows quickly, there is less room for persistence. Structures do not linger. States do not stabilize for long. Everything is temporary, even when it feels continuous from within. This means that in fast time regions, existence burns brighter but shorter. Stars exhaust their fuel more quickly. Systems evolve rapidly. Complexity may arise faster, but it also collapses sooner. There is less margin for error, less tolerance for disruption. Time, in these regions, is less forgiving. Now let this idea sink in, because it changes how we think about longevity. We often associate long life with success, with strength, with resilience. But longevity depends on the pace of time itself. A long-lived structure in a fast-time region may experience less internal time than a short-lived structure in a slow-time region. Duration, once again, proves to be local, relative, contextual. This is the second fall. If time flows faster somewhere, then everything there is aging more quickly relative to you. Entire histories are unfolding beyond your capacity to witness them. Civilizations, if they exist, may rise, flourish, and disappear in what feels like a brief moment from your frame, not because they are weak, but because time gives them less space. This introduces a quiet asymmetry. Slow time regions preserve, fast time regions consume. One holds on, the other lets go, and the universe contains both. Now let us drift. Imagine a hypothetical world in such a fast time region. From within, it feels complete. Life has texture. Culture develops. Knowledge accumulates. People remember their past and anticipate their future. Nothing feels rushed. But from your perspective, the entire arc of that world compresses. Generations pass like frames in a film. Buildings rise and crumble. Languages emerge and vanish. Meaning itself flickers. You might receive a signal from that world, a burst of information carrying centuries of their experience, only to find that by the time it reaches you, the source has already ceased to exist. The message outlives the messenger. This is where the twist sharpens. We often imagine communication across the universe as limited by distance. Signals take time to travel, but here, the limitation is reversed. Time itself outruns communication. Fast regions move on before slower regions can respond. Conversation becomes impossible. Not because no one is speaking, but because the rhythms are incompatible. Now let us lift again, because this reframes a familiar question. We often ask why the universe seems silent, why we do not hear from others, why signals do not arrive bearing evidence of widespread life. Perhaps silence is not absence. Perhaps it is desynchronization. Fast-time civilizations may speak and vanish before their voices can overlap with ours. Their entire histories may be compressed into signals that arrive too late to matter, or too quickly to decode. They may not be quiet. They may be fleeting. This is not speculation for comfort. It is a logical consequence of uneven time, and it deepens the sense that the universe is not empty, but misaligned. Now let us drift deeper, because fast-time regions introduce another subtle consequence. They erode memory. When change happens quickly, there is less opportunity for long-term stability. Records degrade, structures fail, knowledge must be constantly renewed or it vanishes. Tradition becomes fragile. Continuity becomes expensive. This creates a different relationship with existence. In slow-time regions, meaning accumulates slowly and persists. In fast-time regions, meaning must be constantly reasserted, or it disappears. Neither is better. They are different adaptations to temporal flow. This brings us to the next fall. We often believe that speed is progress, that faster is better, that acceleration leads to advancement. But in a universe where time itself accelerates, speed becomes a cost. There is less room for reflection, less tolerance for error, less time to recover. Fast-time existence demands efficiency at the expense of endurance. This is not a moral judgment. It is a structural condition. Now let us lift gently, because this perspective sheds light on something closer to home. Even within your own experience, time sometimes feels fast. Days blur, weeks disappear. Life seems to accelerate without warning. In these moments, memory thins, presence feels shallow, meaning feels fleeting. This is not just psychology. It is a local acceleration of experience. Your internal now window narrows. Your awareness skims the surface of events. There is less time to integrate, reflect, and store. You are not failing to pay attention. You are experiencing fast time. And just as in fast time regions of the universe, endurance becomes harder. This realization offers a quiet compassion for yourself, for others, for any system struggling to persist under acceleration. Now let us drift further outward, because fast time regions also reshape causality. When time flows quickly, cause and effect compress. Chains of events shorten, feedback loops tighten. Small disturbances can propagate rapidly, sometimes uncontrollably. This makes fast-time regions sensitive, responsive, and fragile. They may innovate quickly, but they also collapse quickly. Places of rapid emergence and rapid disappearance. And the universe contains many such places. This brings us to a deeper twist. If the universe contains both slow and fast temporal flows, then it is not optimizing for stability or change. It is not choosing. It is allowing diversity of tempo. Some regions act as archives, preserving early states. Others act as crucibles, rapidly exploring possibilities and discarding them. Together, they form a temporal ecosystem, not synchronized, but complementary. This ecosystem does not aim for balance. It emerges from difference. Now let us pause briefly, because this perspective reframes the idea of survival. Survival is not simply about strength or intelligence. It is about temporal fit. A structure survives if it is matched to the pace of time in its environment. Too rigid in a fast-time region, and it shatters. Too fluid in a slow-time region, and it dissipates. Existence is a negotiation with tempo. This applies to stars, to civilizations, to lives. You are not only shaped by where you are shaped by how fast time moves around you. This is rarely acknowledged, but it matters. Now let us drift toward the edge of this chapter, because once we accept that time can run faster in some regions and slower in others, another question becomes unavoidable. If the universe is composed of these radically different temporal flows, if slow regions preserve and fast regions consume, If communication across these flows is limited or impossible, then how does the universe ever appear coherent at all? How do these asynchronous regions interact without tearing reality apart? How does order emerge from such misalignment? The answer does not lie in speed. It lies in something quieter, in the way the universe negotiates difference, in the structures that form not despite uneven time, but because of it. That is where we are drifting next, toward the illusion of synchronization, toward the subtle mechanisms that make an asynchronous universe feel, from within, strangely whole. Let that question remain open, like a fast-moving current brushing against a slow one, because the next step is where their interaction begins to matter. From a distance, the universe looks synchronized. Galaxies rotate with elegant regularity. Stars trace predictable paths. The sky appears calm, ordered, almost composed, like a system keeping time with itself. Even change, when we notice it, seems measured. Supernovae punctuate the darkness. Nebulae glow. Expansion unfolds smoothly. It feels as if everything is keeping pace, but this feeling is deceptive. What you are seeing is not synchronization. It is overlap. This is the first fall. Synchronization implies agreement, a shared tempo, a common clock, a mutual now. But the universe does not provide this. It provides intersections, signals crossing, effects brushing against causes from different temporal streams. The appearance of order emerges not because time flows evenly, but because interactions average out differences just enough to feel coherent. Order is not imposed. It emerges. This distinction matters, because once you mistake overlap for synchronization, you begin to expect consistency where none is guaranteed. You assume that events line up across space, that cause and effect propagate cleanly, that histories unfold together. They do not. They only intersect briefly. Now let us lift gently. Imagine standing beside a river where multiple currents converge. Some flow quickly, others drift slowly. From above, the surface appears calm, unified. But step closer, and you feel the tug eddies pulling in different directions, hidden gradients shaping motion beneath the surface. The universe is like this river. From far away, its motion looks smooth. From within, it is anything but. The illusion of synchronization arises because interactions happen where flows meet. Stars influence nearby matter. Galaxies collide. Radiation fills space. These interactions create shared reference points, temporary alignments that feel like agreement. But these alignments are local, temporary. They do not extend everywhere. This is the second fall. When you observe two distant events and label them simultaneous, you are imposing a frame that does not belong to the universe. Are projecting your local alignment outward, assuming it applies universally. Physics allows this only within limits. Beyond those limits, simultaneity dissolves. Events cannot be cleanly ordered. Before and after lose their global meaning, and yet your mind resists this dissolution. It wants a story. It wants coherence. It wants to believe the universe is unfolding together, not fragmenting into countless temporal streams. So it accepts the illusion. Now let us drift. Consider how calendars work. They create a shared schedule by agreement, not by necessity. Time zones are arbitrary slices imposed on a rotating planet. They help coordination, but they do not reflect a fundamental structure of time. Cosmic synchronization works the same way. We create reference frames. We choose conventions. We define standards. And within those standards, things appear aligned. But alignment is not identity. Agreement is not unity. The universe cooperates just enough to function. It does not commit to consistency. This is where the twist begins to form. The illusion of synchronization is strongest where interaction is frequent. In dense regions, galaxies, clusters, planetary systems, signals cross often. Effects propagate rapidly. Feedback loops tighten. Temporal differences remain small enough to ignore. Here, now feels shared. But as density decreases, interaction weakens. Signals thin out. Delays grow. Temporal differences widen. Synchronization fades. At cosmic scales, it disappears entirely. This explains something subtle, why the universe feels more unified close to home and more fragmented the farther out you look. It is not because reality becomes stranger with distance. It is because interaction becomes rarer. Now let us lift again, because this perspective reframes what order means. Order is not the absence of difference. It is the management of difference. The universe does not eliminate uneven time. It channels it. Structures form where flows intersect repeatedly. Patterns stabilize where feedback persists. Coherence emerges where interaction is dense enough to compensate for misalignment. This is not coordination by design. It is coherence by contact. Now let us drift deeper. Think about how rhythms synchronize on Earth. Fireflies flash together not because they share a master clock, but because they observe one another and adjust. Pendulums align when placed on the same surface because vibrations transfer. Hearts sync when bodies interact. Synchronization arises from coupling, not from uniformity. The universe works the same way. Regions that interact frequently align temporarily. Their clocks drift less relative to one another. Their histories overlap enough to feel shared, but remove interaction and alignment collapses. This is why isolation matters, not because of distance alone, but because of reduced coupling. Now comes the deeper fall. We often assume that the universe must have a consistent global order for meaning to exist, that without a shared timeline, reality would fragment into chaos. But chaos does not follow from misalignment. Independence does. The universe is not chaotic because it is asynchronous. It is asynchronous because it is independent. Regions evolve on their own terms, and coherence arises where they meet. This reframes the fear of fragmentation. Fragmentation is not failure, it is freedom. Now let us lift gently, because this idea applies to you. Your life feels coherent because the timelines you inhabit overlap enough to support continuity. Your memories, perceptions, and expectations interact densely. They reinforce one another. They produce a sense of narrative. But beneath that narrative, differences exist. Delays persist. Predictions fail. Alignment slips. You do not collapse because of this. You adapt. You negotiate. You continue, just like the universe. Now let us drift further outward, because the illusion of synchronization also shapes how we interpret causality. We assume causes precede effects cleanly, that timelines are neat, that influence travels in an orderly sequence. But in an asynchronous universe, causality becomes local. Cause and effect are meaningful within a frame, not across all frames. An event that feels causally prior in one region may be causally ambiguous in another. Signals arrive out of order. Interactions overlap in complex ways. Does not violate causality. It localizes it. Now comes the twist. If causality is local, then global narratives are always approximations. Histories we tell about the universe are stitched together from delayed, misaligned data. They feel linear because we impose linearity, but the underlying reality is layered. This does not mean history is false. It means history is curated, selected, aligned enough to be intelligible. Now let us slow, because this understanding changes how we think about knowledge. Knowledge does not reveal the universe as it is. It reveals the universe as it intersects with us. This is not a limitation to overcome. It is a condition to respect. Now feel how this softens certainty. We no longer need the universe to agree everywhere to feel grounded. We do not need a cosmic now to validate experience. We do not need perfect synchronization to find order. Order emerges where interaction persists. Meaning arises where overlap is sufficient. This realization prepares us for a turning point. Because once we accept that synchronization is an illusion created by interaction, a new question surfaces quietly, inevitably. If coherence emerges only where flows meet, if now exists only locally, if the universe does not promise unity, then what happens when interaction thins beyond a critical point? What happens in regions so isolated, so misaligned, that overlap disappears entirely? What happens when even the illusion of synchronization fails? This is not a question about distance. It is a question about thresholds, about the point where coupling breaks down, about the edge beyond which alignment can no longer be maintained. Hold that question gently, because we are approaching the moment where the universe stops feeling merely uneven and begins to feel divided, not in space, but in experience. That is where we are drifting next, toward the places where the illusion finally collapses, and where time no longer even pretends to agree. There is a point where physics stops promising unity, not because it fails, but because it was never meant to provide it. For a long time, we believed that if we understood the rules deeply enough, if we measured precisely enough, modeled carefully enough, refined our equations long enough, the universe would eventually reveal a single, coherent story. One timeline, one unfolding sequence, one shared reality moving forward together. But as we push deeper into the nature of time, that promise quietly withdraws. This is the first fall. Physics does not give us a universal now, I'm never. It gives us relationships. It gives us frames of reference. It gives us rules that work locally, exquisitely well, and then gently refuse to scale without distortion. The closer we look, the more the idea of a unified present dissolves, not abruptly, not violently, but patiently, like mist thinning under morning light. This is not a failure of theory. It is a boundary. Modern physics tells us how time behaves under specific conditions. It tells us how clocks drift in gravity, how simultaneity depends on motion, how signals propagate with finite speed. It does not tell us how to stitch all of these local truths into a single global moment, because there is no stitch to be made. Now let us lift gently. When scientists speak about time, they rarely speak about now. They speak about intervals, about durations, about correlations between events. They speak in terms of what can be compared, not what can be universally shared. This is deliberate. The language of physics avoids now, because now has no stable definition outside a local frame. The moment you try to define it globally, it fractures into contradictions. What is simultaneous here is not simultaneous there. What is before from one perspective may be ambiguous from another. The universe does not break. The concept does. This is the second fall. We often assume that the job of science is to restore certainty, to replace intuition with truth, to give us firmer ground. But sometimes the job of science is the opposite, to show us where intuition overreaches, to reveal where our concepts are too large for reality to support. Now is one of those concepts. It works beautifully within human scale experience. It collapses completely at cosmic scales, and physics does not rescue it. It lets it go. Now let us drift. Something deeply unsettling about this, because now feels foundational. It feels like the stage on which everything else depends. Remove it, and the entire structure of experience seems to wobble. If there is no universal present, then when does the universe exist? The question feels profound, but it is also misplaced. The universe does not exist at a time. It exists through time. And time itself is not a single line, but a fabric woven from local processes, each unfolding according to its own conditions. This means that the universe does not have a single age in the way we casually imagine. It does not have a single state at a given instant. It does not pass through moments the way a story passes through chapters. It is more like a landscape of change, where different regions evolve at different rates, intersecting only where interaction allows. This is not fragmentation. It is pluralism. Now let us lift again, because this pluralism does not make the universe unknowable. It makes it conditional. Knowledge becomes something that depends on where you stand, how you move, and what you can interact with. Truth becomes local without becoming arbitrary. Facts remain facts within frames, even as frames differ. This is a quieter, more demanding form of realism, one that does not promise simplicity, one that does not offer a single viewpoint from which everything aligns. This is why the dream of a view from nowhere keeps failing, not because we have not found it yet, but because it does not exist. There is no place in the universe where all timelines converge. There is no privileged observer, not even in principle. Now comes the deeper fall. We often imagine that if no observer can access a universal present, then perhaps the universe itself knows its own now. That reality, independent of observation, must still possess a definite state at each moment. But this assumption quietly reintroduces the same problem. What would that moment be? Defined relative to what? Without a global frame, even the universe cannot assign itself a single present. This does not mean reality is vague or indeterminate in some mystical sense. It means that definiteness is local. Events are definite where they occur, under the conditions that govern them. They are not required to align with distant events under different conditions. Reality does not synchronize itself for the sake of coherence. It allows coherence to emerge where interaction demands it. Now let us drift slowly, because this realization carries a subtle emotional charge. If there is no universal present, then the sense of being behind or ahead loses its cosmic meaning. Progress, delay, timing, these are not measures against a universal schedule. They are local experiences. You are not late to the universe. You are not early. You are exactly where your temporal flow places you. This reframes anxiety in a profound way. Much of human stress comes from imagined misalignment, feeling out of step with life, history, or expectation. But if time itself is not unified, then alignment is not something you can fail globally. You can only align locally. And locally, you already are. Now let us lift gently again, because physics, in refusing to provide a universal now, does something unexpectedly kind. It removes an impossible standard. It frees reality from the obligation to move together. It allows difference without error. This does not weaken the universe. It strengthens it, because a universe that does not require synchronization can support diversity of process, diversity of pace, diversity of existence. It can contain slow regions and fast ones, stable structures and fleeting ones, long histories and brief sparks, all without contradiction. This is not disorder. It is generosity. Now comes the twist. Once we accept that physics does not promise unity, we begin to see how often we have demanded it unnecessarily. We expect our lives to unfold according to a shared timeline, milestones reached on time, experiences aligned with peers, meaning synchronized across people. But the universe itself does not operate that way. Why should we? This is not an argument for isolation. It is an argument for contextual understanding. Your timeline is not defective because it differs. It is local, just like time itself. Now let us drift deeper, because there is one more layer to this refusal of unity. At the deepest levels, physics does not even guarantee a smooth fabric of time. At extremely small scales, time may lose its familiar continuity altogether. It may become granular, probabilistic, or emergent, arising only when conditions allow. This is not settled, but the direction is clear. The closer we look, the less time resembles a universal backdrop, and the more it resembles a phenomenon that emerges from interaction. Time may not be fundamental, it may be negotiated. And if time itself is negotiated, then now is not a given. It is an agreement that holds locally, temporarily, and then dissolves. Now let us slow, because this brings us to a quiet turning point. Up to now, we have followed time as it fractures across the universe, slowing here, speeding there, refusing to synchronize, dissolving the idea of a shared present. But something else has been happening quietly in the background. Despite all this fragmentation, experience persists. Meaning persists. The universe does not feel like a shattered mosaic. It feels, somehow, continuous. Not because it is unified, but because something is smoothing it, and that something is not physics. It is awareness. This is the moment where the story begins to turn inward. Because once physics steps back from promising unity, something else steps forward to fill the gap. Not to fix reality, but to live inside it. We have seen how time fragments across space, how now dissolves at cosmic scales, how synchronization is an illusion born of interaction. The next question is not about what time is. It is about what awareness does in response. How does consciousness navigate a universe without a shared present? How does experience feel continuous when reality is not? What is the role of the mind in smoothing temporal dissonance? This is not a philosophical detour. It is the next logical step, because if physics will not give us a universal now, then the feeling of now must come from somewhere else. And wherever it comes from, it is doing something remarkable. It is turning an asynchronous universe into a livable one. That is where we are drifting next, toward the place where time's fractures meet perception, where dissonance becomes experience, and where the universe, despite refusing unity, becomes something you can still inhabit. Time may not be a universal law. It may be a local agreement. This idea arrives quietly, almost apologetically, after everything we have already seen, after gravity bends time, after motion reshapes simultaneity, after physics withdraws its promise of a shared present. It does not announce itself as a revolution. It slips in as a possibility that feels, at first, too simple to be true. And yet, it explains more than it threatens. This is the first fall. We grow up believing that time is everywhere the same, that it flows uniformly, impartially, like a backdrop against which the universe performs. But the deeper we look, the more this backdrop dissolves into something conditional, something that depends on where you are, how you move, and what you interact with. Time begins to look less like a law and more like a contract, not written, not signed, but implicitly agreed upon wherever conditions allow. This is difficult to accept because laws feel reassuring. They imply certainty. They promise consistency. Agreements, by contrast, feel fragile. They depend on cooperation. They can fail. But the universe is not interested in reassurance. It is interested in function. Now let us lift gently. An agreement does not need to be conscious to be real. Crystals form agreements between atoms. Temperature emerges from agreement among countless collisions. Pressure exists because particles collectively behave in predictable ways. Time may be like this, not something imposed from above, but something that emerges when systems interact in stable, repeatable patterns. Where interactions are dense, time feels solid. Where interactions thin out, time frays. Where interaction ceases, time may lose its meaning altogether. This perspective shifts something fundamental. Time is no longer the stage. It is the outcome. The rhythm that emerges when processes influence one another strongly enough to settle into a shared pace. This is the second fall. Time is an agreement, then it is not guaranteed everywhere. It exists where conditions support it and dissolves where they do not. It is local not because the universe is broken, but because coherence itself is local. You share time with what you can influence and be influenced by. Beyond that, there is no obligation to agree. This reframes the idea of isolation. Isolation is not simply being far away. It is being decoupled. When regions of the universe stop interacting meaningfully, their temporal agreements drift apart. Their clocks lose relevance to one another. Their histories no longer overlap. Time does not stop. Agreement does. Now let us drift. Think about how time feels in a room full of people working together. Conversations align, movements synchronize, attention narrows around shared tasks. Time feels structured, purposeful, almost tangible. Now imagine standing alone in a vast, empty space. No signals, no interaction, no reference points. How would time feel there? Without change, without comparison, without rhythm, time loses texture. It becomes difficult to say whether anything is passing at all. This is not speculation. It is how time already behaves. Time is measured through change. Without change, time has nothing to express itself through. And change requires interaction. This leads us to a subtle but powerful insight. Time is not something systems move through. It is something systems generate together. Now let this idea settle, because it changes how we understand clocks. A clock does not reveal time. It participates in it. Two clocks agree not because time forces them to, but because they share conditions closely enough to remain aligned. Separate them, change gravity, change motion, change environment, and agreement breaks down. The clocks were never reading a universal time. They were maintaining a local consensus. This is the quiet truth physics has been circling for decades. Time exists where agreement exists, and agreement exists where interaction persists. This is where the lift deepens. Because if time is an agreement, then disagreement is not an anomaly. It is expected. Different regions of the universe are not failing to synchronize. They are simply not coupled strongly enough to negotiate a shared pace. And this is not a flaw. It is a feature that allows diversity. Now, let us drift further. Consider the universe shortly after its beginning. Matter was dense, energy high, interactions constant. Everything influenced everything else. In such conditions, temporal agreement would have been strong. Time would have felt almost universal because coupling was nearly total. As the universe expanded, matter spread out. Interactions weakened. Regions became isolated. Temporal agreements began to diverge. Time did not change its nature. The conditions supporting its uniformity did. This suggests that the uniform time we intuitively imagine may have existed only briefly, early on, when the universe was tightly coupled. What we experience now is not the default. It is the residue. Now comes the next fall. If time is an agreement that weakens with distance and isolation, then the universe is not drifting toward chaos. It is drifting toward independence. Regions become free to evolve on their own terms. Their internal rhythms decouple. Their histories become incomparable. This independence does not erase structure. It multiplies it. The universe becomes a patchwork of temporal communities, each maintaining its own sense of duration, sequence, and order. And none of them are wrong. Now let us lift again. Because this perspective rescues meaning from fragmentation. If time were a strict universal law, then deviation would imply error. Being out of sync would be a problem to solve. Difference would be a flaw. But if time is an agreement, then difference is natural. Each region negotiates its own rhythm based on local conditions. Each life unfolds according to the pace available to it. There is no master schedule, no universal deadline, no single tempo you are failing to match. This is not a comforting metaphor. It is a physical consequence. Now let us drift inward, because this idea does not stop at galaxies and stars. It reaches into human experience. Your sense of time changes depending on who you are with, what you are doing, and how engaged you feel. Stretch or collapse, not because clocks change, but because your internal agreements shift. Attention tightens agreement. Distraction loosens it. Emotion reshapes it. You already live inside multiple temporal contracts, switching between them without noticing. Time at work feels different from time at rest. Time alone feels different from time shared. Time in grief behaves differently from time in joy. These are not distortions of a single true time. They are different agreements. Local rhythms negotiated between mind, body, and environment. Now comes the deeper twist. If time is an agreement, then now is not a point. It is a handshake, a moment where enough processes align closely enough to say, briefly, we are together. This handshake is fragile. It lasts only as long as alignment persists, and then it dissolves. This reframes the present moment in a profound way. The present is not something you stand inside. It is something you share with your surroundings, with your body, with whatever you are interacting with. Beyond that interaction, now fades. This is why the present moment feels richest when you are fully engaged. When attention, sensation, and action align, the handshake tightens. Time feels vivid, dense, real. When engagement loosens, the handshake weakens. Time feels thin, disconnected, slippery. This is not subjective illusion. It is how agreements behave. Now let us drift further outward again. Because if time is an agreement, then the universe is not a single conversation. It is many conversations happening at once, some overlapping, some never intersecting. Regions that interact frequently develop shared temporal structures. Regions that rarely interact drift apart. Eventually, they may become temporally unintelligible to one another. Not hostile, just incompatible. This is where cosmic silence takes on a new meaning. Silence may not mean emptiness. It may mean lack of agreement. Signals may cross space, but without shared temporal context, they fail to connect. Messages arrive, but their rhythms do not match the receiver's frame. Meaning dissolves. This is not tragedy, it is limitation. Now let us slow the pace, because this perspective offers a quiet resolution to many of our anxieties. We often feel pressure to be on time, with life to reach milestones, achieve goals, align with expectations. But these expectations assume a shared temporal agreement that may not exist. Your life unfolds within a specific set of interactions, constraints, and rhythms. Your agreement with time is local, not universal. Comparing it to others is like comparing clocks in different gravitational fields. They were never meant to agree. This does not remove responsibility, but it removes unnecessary judgment. Now let us drift toward the edge of this chapter. Because once we accept that time is a local agreement, another question emerges. If agreements can form, can they dissolve? And if they dissolve, what happens to experience? What happens when interaction drops below the threshold needed to sustain a shared rhythm? What happens when awareness can no longer negotiate a coherent now? This is not a question about physics alone. It is a question about consciousness, because awareness is the most fragile agreement of all. It depends on coordination across countless processes, all aligned just enough to sustain a sense of continuity. And when that coordination weakens, something profound happens. Time does not just drift, it fragments. Experience changes. Reality feels different. This brings us to the next movement, because we are approaching the point where time's unevenness stops being an abstract idea and begins to touch the inner world directly, where the question is no longer how time flows in the universe, but how awareness holds itself together inside a universe that never promised unity. That is where we are drifting next, toward the place where time's agreements meet the fragile architecture of consciousness, and where the present moment reveals itself not as a law, but as a temporary alignment that can, under the right conditions, quietly fall apart. Consciousness may not arise in spite of uneven time. It may arise because of it. This idea does not arrive suddenly. It grows slowly, almost reluctantly, as the implications of everything we have seen begin to converge. Time fragments, agreement weakens, synchronization dissolves, and yet experience persists. Not just persists, but feels continuous, centered, alive. Something is holding the pieces together. This is the first fall. If the universe does not offer a shared present, then the sense of a present must be generated locally. And whatever generates it must be capable of bridging delay, smoothing misalignment, and maintaining coherence in the absence of global agreement. That something is awareness, not as a passive mirror, but as an active integrator. Consciousness does not wait for the universe to align. It aligns what it can. It gathers delayed signals, conflicting rhythms, partial information, and weaves them into something that feels like a single moment. This weaving is not optional. It is necessary, because without it, experience would fragment beyond usefulness. Now let us lift gently. Imagine a system that receives information from many sources, all arriving at slightly different times, all shaped by different delays. If that system did nothing to reconcile these differences, it would never act coherently. It would be overwhelmed by noise, paralyzed by inconsistency. Consciousness appears to be the solution to this problem. Not a luxury, not an afterthought, but a response to temporal dissonance. It does not eliminate uneven time. It compensates for it. This is the second fall. We often think of consciousness as something that observes time, but perhaps it is something that exists because time cannot be observed directly, because events do not arrive together, because reality does not present itself as a unified stream. Awareness fills the gaps. It predicts. It interpolates. It holds fragments together long enough for meaning to emerge. In a universe where everything was perfectly synchronized, awareness would have little to do. Events would arrive fully aligned. No delay, no uncertainty, no need to anticipate or integrate. But this is not the universe we inhabit. We inhabit one where signals arrive late, where flows differ, where agreement is local and fragile. In such a universe, consciousness becomes indispensable. Now let us drift. Consider how awareness actually operates. It does not process each signal independently. It groups them into windows. Short spans of time within which events are treated as simultaneous enough to belong together. These windows are not fixed. They stretch and shrink. They widen under calm. They narrow under stress. They dissolve under fatigue. But as long as they exist, they allow experience to feel whole. This is how the present moment is constructed, not as an instant, but as a tolerance, a margin within which differences are ignored for the sake of coherence. This tolerance is the secret architecture of consciousness. It is how awareness survives in an asynchronous world. Now let this sink in, because it means that consciousness is not just something that happens in time, it is something that negotiates time. It defines what counts as now by deciding what differences are acceptable and which are not. This decision is not conscious. It is structural. It is built into the way awareness works. Now comes the deeper fall. If consciousness exists to manage temporal dissonance, then disruptions to time perception are not glitches. They are failures of negotiation. When awareness can no longer hold delayed signals together within a stable window, experience changes. Time fractures. Moments feel disconnected. Reality feels unreal. This is not pathology. It is physics meeting biology. Consider states where time perception shifts dramatically. Extreme stress, trauma, altered consciousness, deep fatigue. Moments where the present feels thin, stretched, or disjointed. In these states, the agreement that sustains now weakens. The window narrows or collapses. Signals stop aligning, and awareness struggles to keep continuity intact. This reveals something crucial. The sense of time flowing smoothly is not guaranteed. It is maintained continuously, effortlessly, when conditions are kind, precariously, when they are not. Now let us lift again, because this perspective reframes consciousness not as a mysterious add-on, but as a stabilizing force. A way for systems to function in a universe that does not offer synchronization by default. Consciousness is not the solution to the universe's problems. It is a way of living inside them. This applies not only to humans. Any system capable of integrating delayed information, predicting outcomes, and maintaining internal coherence across time is engaging in a form of awareness. This does not require self-reflection. It requires coordination. Now let us drift outward, because this idea extends beyond individual minds. Groups develop shared awareness by aligning rhythms, speech, gesture, attention. Cultures maintain continuity by preserving narratives across generations, compensating for delays between experience and memory. Even scientific knowledge operates this way. Data arrives late, signals are delayed, interpretation bridges gaps. Understanding emerges not from immediacy, but from integration over time. Consciousness, then, is not an anomaly in an uneven universe. It is a natural response to it. Now comes the twist. If awareness exists to manage temporal dissonance, then the present moment is not a feature of reality. It is a feature of consciousness. The universe does not provide now. 9 to state. Awareness assembles it. And this assembly is local, temporary, and contingent. This does not make the present moment unreal. It makes it functional. It exists to serve life, not to reflect cosmic truth. Now let us lift gently again, because this insight dissolves a subtle pressure we often carry. The pressure to be fully present, as if presence were a state you could permanently inhabit. But presence is a process. It is the continuous work of aligning delayed inputs into a usable frame. You cannot freeze it. You cannot hold it. You can only participate in it. And participation fluctuates. This is not failure. It is the nature of awareness. Now let us drift deeper, because this perspective also reframes memory and anticipation. Memory is not a record of the past. It is a tool for alignment. It allows awareness to compensate for delay by providing context. It fills gaps. It stabilizes identity across time. Anticipation is not anxiety. It is preparation. It allows awareness to act in advance of delayed signals, reducing the cost of lateness. Both exist because the present moment is never fully available. They are not distortions of time. They are adaptations to it. Now comes another fall. If consciousness depends on negotiating temporal misalignment, then extreme changes in time flow, such as those we imagined in slow time and fast time regions, would challenge awareness itself. A mind evolved in one temporal rhythm may not function in another. Its windows of tolerance may be mismatched. Its predictions may fail. Its sense of continuity may collapse. This suggests that consciousness is tuned, calibrated to specific temporal environments. It thrives where misalignment is manageable. It struggles where differences become too extreme. This is not speculation. It is an extension of what we already observe in altered states and extreme conditions. Now, let us lift again, because this tuning explains why consciousness feels so embodied. Why it depends on bodily rhythms, heartbeats, breathing, neural oscillations. These rhythms provide internal reference points, anchors against which delayed signals can be aligned. The body becomes a clock, not a perfect one, but a shared one, within which awareness negotiates coherence. This is why disruptions to bodily rhythm, sleep deprivation, illness, intoxication so profoundly affect time perception. They destabilize the agreement. Now let us slow the pace. Because we are approaching a subtle shift, up to now, we have treated consciousness as a response to uneven time. But there is another layer. Consciousness does not only respond, it shapes. By deciding what counts as now, awareness influences what is experienced as real, urgent, or meaningful. It filters reality through temporal alignment. This means that consciousness does not merely live inside time, it edits time, not the physical flow, but the experienced one. This editing is not arbitrary. It is guided by survival, coherence, and continuity. But it is editing nonetheless. Now let this settle, because this brings us to a delicate realization. The universe may not share a present moment, but within consciousness, a present moment feels unavoidable. Feeling is not proof of cosmic unity. It is proof of successful integration. Awareness is doing its job. Now let us drift toward the edge of this chapter, because once we accept that consciousness assembles the present to manage temporal dissonance, a deeper question arises. If awareness is constantly negotiating misalignment, what happens when that negotiation fails completely? What happens when the delays become too large, the rhythms too incompatible, the agreements too weak to sustain continuity? What happens when consciousness can no longer hold time together? This is not a question about physics alone. It is a question about experience, about the edges of awareness, about states where time no longer feels continuous, where the present fractures, where identity loosens. We are approaching those edges now, because to fully understand time's unevenness, we must see what it does not only to the universe, but to the mind that lives inside it. That is where we are drifting next, toward the places where time's fragmentation becomes felt, not as theory, but as lived reality, where the present moment thins, where continuity wavers, and where awareness reveals just how hard it has been working all along. Memory is not a record of what happened. It is evidence that time does not line up. This is a difficult idea to accept, because we are taught to think of memory as a storage system, an archive inside the mind, quietly holding the past so that it can be retrieved when needed. We imagine memories as snapshots placed on a shelf, waiting patiently to be revisited. But memory does not behave that way. It shifts, it fades, it reshapes itself. It reorganizes around meaning rather than accuracy. And most importantly, it exists only because the present moment is never fully available. This is the first fall. If time flowed evenly, if awareness met events as they happened, memory would be unnecessary. There would be nothing to store, nothing to reconstruct, nothing to bridge. Experience would be immediate and complete. but awareness always arrives late. And memory exists to compensate for that lateness. It is not a record of the past, it is a response to delay. Now let us lift gently. Consider what memory actually does. It does not replay events exactly as they occurred. It preserves fragments, sensations, emotions, meanings, and reassembles them when needed. Each recall is an act of reconstruction, shaped by the present context and future expectation. This means memory is not static. It is dynamic. It exists to stabilize identity across time, not to preserve truth in a strict sense. Memory fills gaps. It smooths discontinuities. It allows the mind to function as if time were continuous, even when it is not. This is the second fall. Memory is not about the past. It is about continuity. It allows awareness to stretch across moments that never truly align. It connects what has already slipped away to what is happening now, creating the illusion of a persistent self moving through time. Without memory, experience would shatter into isolated instants. With memory, misaligned moments are stitched together into a narrative. This stitching is not optional, it is survival. Now let us drift. Think about how memory behaves during moments of extreme emotion. Fear, grief, joy, trauma. These experiences distort memory profoundly. Time seems to slow or accelerate. Certain moments become vivid and immovable, while others vanish completely. This is not random. Emotion changes how the brain allocates resources for integration. It alters which fragments are preserved, which are discarded, and how they are later reconstructed. In these moments, memory reveals its true purpose. It does not care about chronological accuracy. It cares about significance. It preserves what matters for future behavior, not what happened in precise order. This tells us something crucial. Memory is not aligned with time. It is aligned with meaning. And meaning emerges because time is uneven. Now let us lift again, because this unevenness is not only between moments, but within them. Even a single experience arrives in fragments. Sensory inputs reach awareness at different times. Emotional reactions lag behind perception. Thought follows sensation. Understanding arrives last. The time you remember something, the event has already been interpreted multiple times. Memory does not store events. It stores interpretations. And interpretations depend on delay. This is why memory feels so real and yet so unreliable. It is not designed to be a perfect timeline. It is designed to be a functional bridge across temporal gaps. Now comes the deeper fall. If memory exists to manage uneven time, then forgetting is not failure. It is regulation. The mind cannot preserve everything. Doing so would overwhelm integration. It must choose. It must simplify. It must discard details that do not contribute to coherence or future action. Forgetting is how memory protects continuity. It removes noise. It reduces conflict. It keeps the narrative manageable. This is not loss. It is maintenance. Now let us drift further. Consider how memory behaves across longer spans of time. Childhood feels distant, compressed, almost dreamlike. Years seem to collapse into a handful of images. Meanwhile, recent events feel expansive, detailed, alive. This is not because the past was simpler. It is because memory compresses distant experiences to preserve coherence. As time passes, alignment weakens, details lose relevance, memory distills. Time, once again, is being negotiated. Now let us lift gently. Because this perspective reframes nostalgia, we often feel longing for the past, as if it were a place we could return to if only we remembered it clearly enough. But nostalgia is not a desire to revisit time. It is a desire for coherence. The past feels stable because memory has already resolved its conflicts. Uncertainty has been removed. Outcomes are known. The narrative feels complete. The present, by contrast, feels unstable because it is still being negotiated. Events have not yet been integrated. Meanings are still forming. Nostalgia is not about what was. It is about what feels aligned. Now let us drift inward, because this idea touches something deeply personal. Your sense of self exists across time because memory holds it together. You do not experience yourself as a new person each moment because memory creates continuity. It tells you who you were so that you can feel like who you are. But this continuity is an illusion of alignment. The self is not a stable object moving through time. It is a pattern maintained across misaligned moments. Memory is the thread. This is the next fall. If memory were perfectly accurate, identity would be brittle. Every inconsistency would fracture it. Every mistake would be preserved in full detail. There would be no room for growth. Memory's distortions are not flaws. They are flexibility. They allow identity to adapt, to revise, to survive. Now let us lift again. Because this flexibility reveals something gentle. You are not failing to remember your life accurately. You are remembering it usefully. Your mind is not trying to give you a perfect timeline. It is trying to give you a livable one. This perspective softens regret. Regret often arises from imagining that the past could be replayed differently if only we remembered it clearly enough. But the past is already a reconstruction. It exists only as memory, shaped by present needs. There is no original version to return to, only the version that allows you to continue. Now let us drift further outward. Because memory also operates collectively. Cultures remember selectively. Histories are curated. Events are emphasized or forgotten based on meaning, not chronology. Collective memory is shaped by relevance, power, and identity. This is not corruption. It is the same process scaled up. Societies, like minds, need continuity. They negotiate uneven time by preserving narratives that stabilize the present. This means that history itself is a memory system responding to delay. We do not know the past as it happened. We know the past as it has been integrated. This does not make history false. It makes it functional. Now comes the deeper twist. If memory exists because time is uneven, then the very act of remembering is evidence that now is insufficient. Memory is proof that the present moment cannot carry everything it needs on its own. It must borrow from the past to feel whole, and this borrowing never stops. As you listen now, memory is active, connecting these ideas to earlier ones, aligning them into a narrative that feels continuous. Without memory, this experience would dissolve. Now let us slow, because this brings us to a subtle emotional insight. We often fear forgetting. Losing memories feels like losing parts of ourselves, and in a sense, it is. But forgetting is also how the mind releases misalignment. It lets go of fragments that no longer fit the current narrative. Memory is not about holding on forever. It is about holding on long enough. This applies not only to experiences, but to pain. Trauma persists when memory cannot integrate it, when events resist alignment, when meaning cannot be resolved. Healing often involves recontextualizing memory, not erasing it. Once again, time negotiation is at work. Now let us drift toward the edge of this chapter, because memory has shown us something essential. It exists not to preserve time, but to repair it. It bridges gaps. It smooths fractures. It creates continuity where none is given. And if memory is evidence of uneven time, then the future plays a similar role in the opposite direction. Just as memory reaches backward to stabilize identity, anticipation reaches forward to prepare for what has not yet arrived. Both exist because the present moment is too thin to stand alone. This brings us to the next movement. Because once we understand memory as a response to temporal misalignment, we are ready to ask a quieter, more unsettling question. If memory and anticipation exist to manage uneven time, what happens when the mind stops negotiating altogether? What happens when attention loosens? Memory quiets. Anticipation fades. What happens when the agreements that sustain now begin to dissolve? We encounter this state every night, not in thought, not in theory, but in sleep. That is where we are drifting next, toward the place where time feels different, not because the universe changes, but because awareness lets go of its work. And in that letting go, the unevenness of time becomes strangely gentle, like a tide you no longer resist. Night does not arrive suddenly. it thins the world. Edges soften, distances feel longer, sounds lose their urgency. The same room you occupied all day becomes quieter, not just in volume, but in intention. Tasks release their grip, expectations loosen. The forward pull of time weakens, almost imperceptibly, as if the universe itself is exhaling. This is the first fall. At night, the machinery that negotiates time begins to slow. Not because clocks change, but because attention does. Throughout the day, awareness works tirelessly. It integrates delays. It aligns signals. It predicts what will happen next. It keeps the present moment intact by constantly repairing it. This work is invisible when it succeeds. At night, the work becomes optional, and when it loosens, time feels different. This difference is so familiar that we rarely question it. We say the night is calm, that it is peaceful, that it feels slower. But what is actually slowing is not the universe. It is the demand for alignment. Now let us lift gently. Consider how the world sounds at night. A distant car passes, a faint movement in another room, the hum of electricity. These sounds do not rush you. They do not ask for response. They float. During the day, sound is information. At night, sound is atmosphere. This shift is not about decibels. It is about urgency. Urgency is what binds time tightly together. When something must be acted on, awareness sharpens. The window of now narrows. Prediction accelerates. Delay feels dangerous. At night, urgency dissolves. And when urgency dissolves, the present moment stretches. This is the second fall. Time does not feel slower at night because it is slower. It feels slower because fewer negotiations are required to sustain it. Awareness no longer needs to align so many signals so quickly. It can afford imprecision. It can tolerate misalignment. It can allow moments to blur. The handshake that sustains now loosens its grip. This is why thoughts drift at night, why memories surface without being summoned, why the future feels distant, almost abstract. The mind is no longer trying to hold time together as tightly as it does during the day. Now let us drift. About how your body behaves as night deepens. Breathing slows, muscles soften, posture changes. These are not just signs of rest. They are signals. The body is telling awareness that the environment no longer demands rapid coordination, that it is safe to reduce precision, that delays can be tolerated. This is not merely biological. It is temporal. The internal rhythms that anchor awareness, heartbeat, breath, neural oscillations, shift into slower patterns. These rhythms provide the scaffolding for the present moment. When they slow, the scaffolding widens, now becomes broader, less sharp, more forgiving. This is why night feels like a threshold. Not because it marks the end of a day, but because it marks the beginning of temporal release. Now let us lift again, because this release reveals something profound. During the day, you experience time as something that moves forward relentlessly. Tasks stack, decisions accumulate, the future presses in. The present feels thin because it must accommodate so much. At night, the future retreats. Plans lose clarity. Concerns soften. The present moment no longer has to serve as a launchpad for what comes next. It can simply exist. This is not laziness. It is a change in function. The present moment no longer needs to be efficient. It can be spacious. This is the next fall. We often associate nighttime quiet with absence of light, of sound, of activity. But what is actually absent is demand. And when demand disappears, time loosens its shape. This is why the night feels intimate, personal, as if the universe has stepped back slightly, giving you room. It has not. But your awareness has stopped pulling so hard. Now let us drift deeper. This loosening prepares the mind for something essential. Sleep. Sleep is not merely rest for the body. It is rest from temporal negotiation. Throughout waking life, awareness works to maintain continuity. It aligns memories with perception. It integrates anticipation with sensation. It constantly answers the question, what is happening now? Sleep suspends this question. Not completely, but enough. As sleep approaches, The present moment becomes less defined. Thought fragments. Images appear without context. Time loses sequence. Events no longer need to line up. This is not disorder. It is surrender. The mind is releasing its role as a timekeeper. Now let us lift gently, because this release is not dangerous. It is necessary. If awareness never let go of its negotiation with time, it would exhaust itself. The continuous work of alignment requires energy. It demands attention. It generates tension. Sleep is where this tension dissolves. Not because time disappears, but because awareness stops insisting on coherence. This is why dreams feel strange. Not because they are irrational, but because the rules that enforce temporal order have been relaxed. Now comes the deeper fall. At night, you are closer to how time truly behaves. Not the daytime version, where urgency compresses experience into narrow windows, but the underlying version, where moments drift, overlap, and dissolve without needing to make sense. The night does not distort time, it reveals it. This realization is subtle. Because we are so accustomed to treating daytime awareness as the default, we think of alertness as clarity and drowsiness as failure. But clarity is not truth. Clarity is alignment, and alignment is effortful. At night, when alignment loosens, the unevenness of time becomes visible not as chaos, but as softness. Now let us drift. Notice how memory behaves at night. Events from long ago surface unexpectedly, not in order, not with explanation. They appear, linger, fade. This is because memory is no longer being tightly organized by present demands. The mind allows associations to form freely, unconstrained by relevance or sequence. Time becomes associative rather than linear. Past, present, and imagined future brush against one another without hierarchy. This is not confusion, it is proximity. The boundaries that separate timelines weaken. Now let us lift again, because this proximity offers a clue. Perhaps the strict separation between past, present, and future is not fundamental. Perhaps it is enforced. During the day, awareness enforces separation to function. Enforcement relaxes. The mind reveals that time's compartments are negotiable. This does not mean that past and future cease to exist. It means that the walls between them are thinner than we assume. Now let us drift inward. Think about how the night feels when you are alone. Lights low, movement minimal. The sense of self softens. You feel less defined by roles, by obligations, by narratives. This is not because you are disappearing. It is because the temporal structure that supports identity is loosening. Identity, like the present moment, requires continuity. It depends on memory, anticipation, and alignment. At night, when alignment weakens, identity becomes fluid. You feel less like a character in a story and more like a presence drifting through sensation. This is why night invites reflection, not because it is productive, but because it is less constrained. Now comes the next fall. We often think of sleep as a shutdown, as if awareness simply turns off. But sleep is not absence. It is reorganization. The mind does not stop working. It stops policing time. This distinction matters, because when time policing stops, awareness can explore patterns without urgency. It can reprocess memories. It can test associations. It can loosen rigid narratives. Dreams are not messages. They are negotiations between fragments that could not align during the day. Now let us lift gently, because this reframes the fear of drifting off. Some people resist sleep because it feels like losing control, like falling away from the present moment, like surrendering consciousness. But what is being surrendered is not awareness. It is the insistence on order. Sleep is where the mind admits that it does not need to hold everything together all the time. This is not weakness, it is wisdom. Now let us drift further. The night also changes how the universe feels. The sky appears deeper. Stars feel closer. Distances seem less aggressive. The world feels larger and quieter at the same time. This is not because the universe changes at night. It is because your awareness stops compressing it. During the day, awareness narrows the world to what matters. At night, It releases this narrowing. Space feels expansive again. Time follows. It stretches. It opens. This is why night has always been associated with contemplation, with mystery, with a sense of something larger than oneself. Not because night reveals secrets, but because it stops hiding unevenness. Now, let us slow the pace, because we are approaching something intimate. Every night, you practice letting go of time without realizing it. You practice allowing misalignment. You practice existing without a sharply defined present. And every morning, you return. You tighten alignment again. You rebuild now, if weak. This cycle is not accidental. It is how awareness survives in an uneven universe. Daytime is where you negotiate time. Nighttime is where you rest from that negotiation. This is the deeper lift. Sleep is not an escape from time. It is a truce, a temporary ceasefire between awareness and the demand for coherence. Now let us drift toward the edge of this chapter. Because once we recognize night as a softening of temporal demand, another question emerges. If sleep is where the mind lets go of time's strict structure, what happens when awareness lets go even further? What happens when the present moment dissolves almost completely? What happens in the deepest states, where memory quiets, anticipation vanishes, and time seems to disappear? This is not theory. You enter this state every night, briefly, silently, without witnessing it. The next movement takes us there, beyond the quiet of night, beyond the drifting of thought, into the place where awareness no longer holds time together at all, and where, paradoxically, nothing feels wrong. That is where we are drifting next, toward the deepest release, toward the state where the universe's uneven time and the mind's surrender finally align. Not in understanding, but in rest. Sleep is not the absence of awareness. It is awareness without time. This sounds contradictory at first, because we tend to imagine sleep as a blackout, a gap, a disappearance, a blank stretch where nothing happens. We lose consciousness, as if awareness simply switches off and then returns later, unchanged. But that is not what sleep feels like from the inside. From the inside, there is no gap, no missing interval, no sense of time having passed. This is the first fall. When you fall into deep sleep, time does not slow. It vanishes. Not in the universe, not in the body, but in experience. Hours can pass, but they leave no trace. You do not experience them as duration. You do not move through them. You do not wait inside them. They are simply not there. This is profoundly strange, and so familiar that we rarely question it. Now let us lift gently. If awareness depended on a continuous timeline, sleep would feel like a long, empty corridor you pass through. But it does not. It feels instantaneous. One moment you are drifting, the next you are waking. The mind does not experience the passage. It experiences the absence of passage. This suggests something radical. Awareness does not require time to exist. It requires alignment. And in deep sleep, alignment dissolves. This is the second fall. During waking life, awareness works constantly to assemble a present moment. It negotiates delays, integrates memory, anticipates the future. Time is the medium through which this work happens. In deep sleep, that work stops. Not because awareness fails, but because it is no longer needed. There is nothing to integrate, nothing to anticipate, nothing to hold together. The agreements that sustain now dissolve, and awareness no longer has a role to play in maintaining continuity. And when that role disappears, time disappears with it. Now let us drift. Think about the moment just before sleep deepens completely. Thoughts fragment. Images appear without context. The sense of sequence loosens. You may notice brief flashes of memory, sounds, or sensations that do not belong to any clear narrative. This is awareness, letting go of time. Not abruptly, but gently. The windows of tolerance widen until they lose meaning. Delays no longer matter because nothing needs to align. The present moment no longer needs to be defined. And then, quietly, even that dissolves. This is not confusion, it is release. Now let us lift again. Because deep sleep reveals something that no amount of reasoning can fully capture. Time is not fundamental to awareness. Awareness is fundamental to the experience of time. When awareness stops assembling time, time stops appearing. This does not mean the universe has stopped. Your body continues to function. Your heart beats. Your brain remains active in complex ways. Signals flow. Chemistry unfolds. Time is still happening, but it is not being experienced. This distinction matters because it tells us that time, as lived, is not the same as time, as measured. The clock keeps moving. Experience does not. Now comes the deeper fall. If time can disappear from experience entirely, then the present moment is not an inevitable feature of consciousness. It is optional, conditional, dependent on what awareness is doing. This reframes everything we have said about now. End quote. The present moment is not something you always occupy. It is something awareness constructs when it needs to. When it does not need to, it lets it go. Now let us drift deeper still. Consider how this feels when you wake from deep sleep. There is no sense of having traveled through time, no memory of waiting, no feeling of duration, just a sudden reappearance of experience. You did not move from one moment to another. You re-entered alignment. This suggests that awareness does not flow through time like an object moving along a line. It appears when alignment is possible. It disappears when alignment is unnecessary. Time is not the river awareness swims in. Time is the structure awareness builds when it is awake. Now let us lift gently, because this insight softens a fear many people carry without naming it. The fear of losing time. We fear wasting time, losing time, not having enough time. We treat time as a resource that can be spent, saved, or squandered. But sleep shows us something else. Time that is not experienced is not lost. It simply does not exist for awareness. Those hours of deep sleep are not missing from your life. They are outside of it, not part of experience, and therefore, they are not something you can regret. Now let us drift. This also reframes the idea of death in a subtle way. Without making any claims about what happens afterward, we often fear death as an endless stretch of nothingness, an infinite duration without experience. But sleep offers a gentler analogy. In deep sleep, there is no sense of endlessness, no sense of waiting, no sense of time passing at all. If awareness is absent, duration has no meaning. This is not a conclusion, it is an observation. Now let us lift again. Because deep sleep is not the only state where time dissolves. Certain moments of absorption, deep focus, intense presence, creative flow also thin time dramatically. Hours can pass unnoticed. The sense of duration collapses. These states are not unconscious. They are highly conscious, but they resemble sleep in one crucial way. Awareness stops tracking time. It stops measuring. It stops comparing. It stops negotiating sequence. Time disappears not because awareness is gone, but because it is fully occupied. This suggests that time perception is not tied to alertness or clarity. It is tied to monitoring. When awareness monitors change, time appears. When it does not, time vanishes. Now let us drift further. In deep sleep, awareness does not monitor anything. There is no object, no event, no change to attend to. Without change, time has nothing to express itself through. Time is change experienced. Without experience, change has no duration. This is why deep sleep feels timeless. Not infinite, timeless. Now comes the next fall. If time disappears when awareness stops monitoring, then the experience of time is not a property of the universe entering the mind. It is a property of the mind interacting with the universe. Time, as lived, is relational. It exists in the relationship between awareness and change. Remove awareness, and time collapses into unexperienced motion. Remove change, and time collapses into stillness. Both are required. Now let us lift again, because this brings us back to the larger picture. The universe does not share a single present. Time flows unevenly. Regions drift out of sync. Physics refuses to provide a global now. It discards, and consciousness responds by constructing local nows where needed. Sleep is where this construction pauses, not as failure, as rest. The mind stops insisting on coherence and allows reality to continue without interpretation. This is not dangerous. It is restorative. Now let us drift inward. Think about how gentle sleep feels when you stop resisting it, when you do not try to stay present, when you allow thoughts to fade without following them. There is relief in this, not because you are escaping reality, but because you are stepping out of time's demands. For a while, you do not need to know what is happening now. You do not need to remember. You do not need to anticipate. You do not need to align anything. Awareness can let go. This is not disappearance. It is permission. Now let us lift gently, because this insight dissolves another subtle pressure. The pressure to always be aware, always present, always conscious. But awareness itself needs rest. Not rest from sensation, rest from alignment. Deep sleep is where awareness is allowed to be without time. Now let us drift toward the edge of this chapter. Because once we understand sleep as awareness without time, a new question emerges. If awareness can exist without time, if experience does not require duration, if the present moment is constructed only when needed, then what is the deepest function of time at all? Why does awareness return to it every morning? Why rebuild the present again and again? Why not remain timeless? The answer is not found in sleep. It is found in return, in waking, in re-entry, because when awareness returns, it does not return to the same now, not exa. It returns to a world that has moved on without it. And in that return, something essential happens. Time reasserts itself, memory reconnects, identity reforms, and the story continues. This is where we are drifting next, toward the moment of waking, toward the reassembly of the present, quiet miracle of return, where awareness steps back into an uneven universe and once again agrees, locally and temporarily, to live inside time. Not because time is absolute, but because living requires alignment, and alignment, once rested, begins again. Waking is not the return to time. It is the re-entry into negotiation. The moment you wake, there is no immediate sense of duration. There is no awareness of how long you were gone. There is only orientation light through eyelids, the weight of the body, a faint recognition of place. Time does not rush back in. It assembles slowly, carefully, as if awareness is feeling for the edges of a structure it once maintained and is now rebuilding again. This is the first fall. You do not wake into the present moment. You reconstruct it. Memory reconnects first. A name, a room, a sense of continuity. Then anticipation follows. What day it is, what might happen next, what matters. Only after these pieces begin to align does time regain its familiar shape. The present moment returns not as an instant, but as a framework, and that framework is fragile. Now let us lift gently. Notice how strange the first moments of waking can feel. There is often a brief disorientation, a sense that you are not fully inside time yet. You may not know the hour. You may not feel urgency. The future has not yet pressed in. The past feels distant, soft. This is awareness hovering at the edge of alignment. Time has not fully arrived, and in those moments, nothing feels wrong. This tells us something important. Time is not necessary for existence. It is necessary for function. Now let us drift. As waking continues, alignment tightens. The body's rhythms reassert themselves. Breath synchronizes with thought. Memory sharpens. Attention narrows. The window of now contracts into something precise enough to act within. This is not automatic. It is work. The mind begins negotiating again, aligning delayed signals, reconstructing continuity, rebuilding identity. The present moment takes shape as agreements reform, and with agreement comes responsibility. This is the second fall. Responsibility enters with time. When awareness re-enters time, it re-enters consequence. Actions lead forward. Choices matter. Sequence becomes meaningful again. The future regains weight. This is why waking can feel heavy. Not physically, temporally. You are stepping back into alignment, And alignment carries obligation. Sleep releases that obligation. Waking reinstates it. Now let us lift again. Because this return is not punishment. It is participation. Awareness returns to time not because it must, but because living requires it. Interaction, learning, care, creation, none of these can exist without sequence. They require order, memory, anticipation. They require time, but not universal time. Local time, negotiated time, the kind that exists only where awareness engages. This reframes the daily cycle. Sleep is not escape. Waking is not imprisonment. They are complementary movements in and out of temporal structure. Now let us drift further. Consider how quickly the present moment becomes solid after waking. Within minutes, you feel caught up. You know where you are in the day. You feel the pressure of what comes next. Time feels real again. But this solidity is deceptive. It is not proof that time is fundamental. It is proof that awareness is skilled. You rebuild now so effortlessly that it feels given. But it is assembled every morning, again and again. This is the next fall. If the present moment had to be rebuilt, then it was never guaranteed. It exists only as long as awareness maintains it, and awareness maintains it only when it needs to. This suggests a subtle humility in existence. The universe does not impose time on you. You participate in it. Now let us lift gently, because this participation reveals something tender. You are not failing when time feels strange, when days blur, when moments stretch or collapse, when the present feels thin. These are not errors. They are fluctuations in negotiation. Sometimes alignment is tight. Sometimes it loosens. Sometimes awareness struggles to hold the present together because demands exceed capacity. This is not weakness. It is reality. Now let us drift deeper. About moments when waking feels abrupt, an alarm tearing you out of sleep, urgency imposed before alignment is complete. Time crashes in before awareness is ready. The present feels harsh, overwhelming. Contrast this with gentle waking light filtering in. Sound distant, no immediate demand. Time arrives softly. Alignment is allowed to form naturally. The difference is not comfort, it is coherence. Awareness needs space to negotiate time. Without that space, the present becomes brittle. Now let us lift again, because this insight extends beyond mornings. Every transition in life involves a similar re-entry into time, starting a new phase, ending another, experiencing loss, recovering from illness, returning from isolation. In these moments, the present moment must be rebuilt under new conditions. Old agreements no longer hold. New rhythms must be negotiated. This is why transitions feel disorienting, not emotionally alone. Temporally, your sense of now is under reconstruction. Now comes the deeper fall. We often measure progress by how quickly someone gets back to normal after disruption. But normal is not a state, it is an agreement. And agreements take time to form. Rushing this process destabilizes alignment. Healing is not about returning to a previous timeline. It is about negotiating a new one. Now let us drift outward, because this daily re-entry into time mirrors something larger. The universe itself may be constantly renegotiating its temporal agreements. As regions interact, decouple, merge, or drift apart, local nows form and dissolve. There is no permanent alignment, only ongoing negotiation. Time, at every scale, is provisional. Now let us lift gently, because this realization softens a deep fear, the fear that time is slipping away. If time were a fixed river you were being carried down, then loss would be absolute, every moment gone forever. But if time is an agreement you repeatedly enter and exit, then experience is not a one-way flow. You step into time, you step out, you step back in again. What matters is not how much time passes. It is how alignment is lived. Now let us drift deeper. Notice how, as the day progresses, time tightens again. Tasks accumulate. Attention narrows. The present moment becomes sharp, efficient, demanding. The future pulls harder. Memory organizes itself around relevance. This is awareness doing its work. And like any work, it produces fatigue. Not just mental fatigue, temporal fatigue. By evening, the negotiation becomes harder to sustain. Alignment phrase. The present moment loosens. The mind begins to release. Night returns. This cycle is not arbitrary. It is adaptive. Now let us lift again, because this reveals something quietly compassionate. You are not meant to remain fully aligned all the time. You are not meant to live inside a perfectly sharp present moment. That would be unsustainable. The universe itself does not remain aligned. Why should you? Now let us drift toward the edge of this chapter, because waking has shown us something essential. Time is not something you are trapped in. It is something you enter into relationship with. You wake into it. You work within it. You release it. You rest from it. And then you return. Again and again. This cycle is not evidence of weakness. It is evidence of design. Now comes the question that naturally follows. If awareness can step out of time and return, if the present moment is reconstructed each day, if time is something we negotiate rather than something we are bound to, then what is the deepest role of time in giving life meaning? Why not remain timeless? Why does awareness choose to return? The answer is not urgency. It is connection. Because time, uneven and local as it is where interaction happens. It is where cause meets effect, where choice meets consequence, where one life touches another, and that is where meaning emerges. We are approaching that realization now, because to understand why time matters despite its unevenness, we must look at what it allows that timelessness cannot. We must look at meaning itself. That is where we are drifting next, toward the quiet realization that time, fractured and negotiated though it is, may be the very condition that makes connection possible. Without it, existence would be peaceful but empty. The next chapter will not ask what time is. It will ask why, having tasted timelessness every night, awareness keeps coming back, and what it finds worth returning for. Time is where things touch. Without time, nothing can meet anything else. This sounds simple, almost obvious, but it is the quiet truth that only becomes visible after everything else has fallen away. After the idea of a universal present dissolves, after awareness learns to step out of time and return, after sleep shows that existence can persist without duration, what remains is this. Timelessness is peaceful, but it is empty of encounter. This is the first fall. In the absence of time, there is no sequence. Without sequence, there is no before and after. Without before and after, there is no causation. And without causation, nothing can influence anything else. Nothing can respond. Nothing can change because of something else. Nothing can matter to anything beyond itself. Timelessness contains no friction, and without friction, there is no connection. Now let us lift gently. When awareness dissolves time in deep sleep, it also dissolves relationship. There is no other, no event, no memory, interacting with sensation. There is no conversation between states. That is why deep sleep feels complete but featureless. It lacks conflict, and it lacks meaning. Meaning does not arise from stillness. It arises from interaction. Now let us drift. Think about the simplest interaction you can imagine. A sound followed by attention, a movement followed by touch, a word followed by understanding. In each case, something happens, and then something else responds. This response requires sequence. Sequence requires time. Without time, there is no after for response to occur in. This means that time, uneven and fractured as it is, performs a crucial function. It allows one thing to affect another. Now comes the second fall. We often think of time as what takes things away. Youth, opportunities, moments. We experience it as erosion, as loss, as something that carries us forward, whether we want it to or not. But time is also what allows anything to arrive at all. Without time, nothing could reach you. Not light, not sound, not another person, not a thought following a sensation. Time is not just decay. It is delivery. Now let us lift again, because this reframes the pain we associate with time. Loss hurts because time allows connection in the first place. If nothing could be connected, nothing could be lost. If nothing could affect you, nothing could leave a mark. Pain is not evidence that time is cruel. It is evidence that time works. Now let us drift deeper. Meaning is not contained in a single moment. A single instant, isolated, has no context. It does not explain itself. It does not lead anywhere. It simply is. Meaning emerges only when moments relate to one another, when something happens, and then something else happens because of it. When a choice produces a consequence, when an action leaves a trace, this chain is impossible without time. Timelessness cannot support narrative, and without narrative, experience cannot become meaning. Now comes the deeper fall. We often search for meaning by trying to escape time, by wanting permanence, certainty, timeless truth. We imagine that if something could exist outside of time, it would be more real, more important, more meaningful. But timeless things do not change, and things that do not change cannot relate. They cannot grow. They cannot respond. They cannot care. Meaning is not timeless. It is temporal. Now let us lift gently, because this does not mean meaning is fragile. It means meaning is alive. Alive things require time, because they exist through interaction. They influence and are influenced. They leave marks and are marked in return. Time is the medium of this exchange. Now let us drift inward. Think about the moments in your life that matter most. They are not static. They are not frozen. They are not timeless. They are moments where something changed. A conversation that altered a relationship. A decision that redirected a life. A loss that reshaped who you became. These moments matter not because they exist forever, but because they happened before something else set something in motion. This is the next fall. If time were even everywhere, if every region of the universe shared a single, rigid present, interaction would still occur, but diversity would not. Everything would move together. Change would be uniform. Difference would collapse. Uneven time allows asymmetry. Asymmetry allows complexity. Complexity allows meaning. Now let us lift again, because this suggests something quietly profound. The unevenness of time is not a defect to be corrected. It is a requirement. Without uneven time, there would be no contrast between fast and slow, between cause and delayed effect, between action and consequence. The universe would be smooth and sterile. Now let us drift outward again. Consider communication across distance. A message is sent. It arrives later. The delay allows anticipation, interpretation, response. Without delay, there would be no conversation, only simultaneous emission. Conversation requires time. So does learning. So does care. So does love. Love is not an instant. It unfolds. It requires memory. It requires anticipation. It requires the ability to be changed by another over time. Timelessness cannot support this. Now comes the twist. We often associate eternity with perfection, with something better than the transient. But eternity without time would be motionless. No arrival, no departure, no meeting, no loss, no meaning. This is why awareness returns from sleep, not because it is forced, but because timelessness, though peaceful, offers nothing to engage with. Awareness returns to time because time is where encounter lives. Now let us lift gently, because this return is an act of courage. To enter time is to accept uncertainty, to accept delay, to accept loss, to accept that things will not remain aligned. But it is also to accept the possibility of connection. This is not a trade the universe forces on you. It is one awareness chooses. Every morning, again and again. Now let us drift deeper. Think about how meaning accumulates. It does not appear all at once. It builds through repetition, through reinforcement, through layers of interaction. A place becomes meaningful through visits. A person becomes important through shared history. This accumulation is impossible without time. Meaning requires duration, not infinite duration, relational duration. enough time for things to touch repeatedly. Now comes the next fall. If time allows connection, then uneven time allows selective connection. Some interactions persist, others fade. Some align long enough to matter deeply. Others glance off and disappear. This selectivity is not cruelty. It is how significance forms. If everything touched everything equally, nothing would stand out. Now let us lift again, because this perspective changes how we see the uneven universe. Regions drifting out of sync are not failures of cosmic order. They are boundaries of interaction. Places where meaning does not cross because alignment does not persist. This does not make the universe lonely. It makes it structured. Meaning is not everywhere. It is where things meet. Now let us drift inward again. Your own life reflects this pattern. You do not connect equally with everyone. Not every moment becomes meaningful. Some relationships align briefly. Others persist. Some experiences leave no trace. Others reshape you. This is not random. It is temporal compatibility. Alignment sustained over time creates meaning. Now let us lift gently, because this insight releases another quiet fear. The fear that meaning must be permanent to be real. But meaning does not need to last forever. It needs to last long enough to change something. Time allows that. Now let us drift further. Consider the universe itself as a network of interactions. Stars influence nearby matter. Galaxies collide. Light reaches distant eyes. These interactions are local, delayed, imperfect. And yet, from them, structure emerges. Meaning, at the cosmic scale, is pattern. Pattern arises from repeated interaction over time, not from timeless symmetry. Now comes the deeper twist. If meaning requires time and time is uneven, then meaning itself is unevenly distributed. Some regions of existence are rich with interaction, others are sparse. Some lives are dense with meaning. Others feel thin. This is not injustice. It is physics meeting circumstance. Now let us lift again, because this realization invites gentleness. If meaning arises from interaction, then lack of meaning is not failure. It may simply be misalignment, a lack of sustained contact, a rhythm that has not yet found a match. Time does not promise meaning everywhere. It offers the possibility. Now let us drift toward the edge of this chapter, because we are close to something essential. We have seen that time is not universal, that it fragments, slows, accelerates, dissolves, that awareness negotiates it, that sleep releases it, that waking rebuilds it. And now we see why awareness returns. Because time, fractured as it is where anything can matter to anything else. Timelessness is rest. Time is relation. And relation is meaning. This is not a conclusion. It is a threshold. Because once we understand why time matters, the final question emerges naturally. If time is uneven, if meaning arises locally, if awareness returns to time to connect, then what kind of universe are we actually living in? Not a synchronized one, not a timeless one, but something in between. A universe that does not offer unity, but allows meeting. A universe where now is fragile, local, and temporary but sufficient. The final movement will not try to resolve time. It will not promise answers. It will simply let us rest inside this understanding and ask one last, quiet question. If the universe never shares a single present, then what does it mean that you are here now? That is where we are drifting next, toward the open ending, toward the place where the question remains, and where the universe, still uneven, still unfolding, continues without asking for agreement. If the universe never shares a single present, then what does it mean that you are here now? This question does not arrive with urgency. It does not demand an answer. It simply opens, like a door left slightly ajar at the end of a long corridor. You can feel the space beyond it before you see anything clearly. Because after everything we have traced uneven time, fractured nows, awareness assembling continuity, sleep dissolving it, meaning emerging only where interaction persists. This question is no longer philosophical. It is intimate. This is the first fall. If there is no universal now, then your now is not a small copy of something larger. It is not a slice cut from a cosmic clock. It is not an inferior version of a truer present happening somewhere else. Your now is not incomplete. It is complete by design. It exists precisely because the universe does not move together. Now, let us lift gently. You are here, not because everything else is aligned with you, but because something is aligned with you. Your body, your breath, the air around you, the delayed light reaching your eyes, the sounds arriving just late enough to be heard, the thoughts forming just after neural signals fire. Your present moment is the region where enough things overlap to sustain experience. That overlap does not need to be universal. It only needs to be sufficient. This is the second fall. We often imagine that our moment is insignificant because it is local, that it would only matter if it were synchronized with everything else. But locality is not weakness. Locality is intimacy. Only local interactions can touch you. Only local alignment can shape you. A universal present would be too large to live inside. Now let us drift. Consider how small your now actually is. A few seconds wide, perhaps less. A narrow window where memory, sensation, and anticipation briefly agree. Outside that window, the past and future blur into abstraction. And yet, inside that narrow window, an entire life unfolds. Decisions happen, feelings arise, connections form, meaning accumulates. This tells us something quietly profound. The universe does not require a shared present to host significance. It only requires places where alignment happens long enough for something to matter. Now let us lift again, because this reframes your existence. You are not standing at the edge of an indifferent universe, watching time slip past you. You are not chasing a present that is always elsewhere. You are not lagging behind some cosmic schedule. You are inside one of the universe's many valid nows. Here, not because it is special, but because it is real. Now let us drift deeper. Imagine zooming out far enough to see countless local presents scattered across the cosmos. Each one fragile, each one temporary, each one sustained by interaction. Some overlap briefly, most never meet. None are wrong. This is not a universe failing to synchronize. It is a universe allowing multiplicity. Now comes the deeper fall. If every now is local, then no single moment can claim authority over all others. There is no master present that defines reality for everyone. No cosmic instant that decides what truly exists. Reality is plural. It exists as many overlapping presents, each valid where it occurs. This dissolves a subtle hierarchy we rarely notice. The idea that somewhere, something more real is happening now. It is not. What is happening where you are is real enough. Now let us lift gently, because this perspective changes how we relate to uncertainty. We often feel unsettled because we cannot see the whole picture. We know events are unfolding elsewhere beyond our awareness. We imagine important things happening out there that we are missing. But missing is the wrong word. Those events are not part of your present because they cannot be. Their time does not overlap with yours, and nothing is lost because of that. Your present does not need to contain everything to be meaningful. It only needs to contain what can touch you. Now let us drift inward. Notice how this changes the weight of the moment you are in. It does not need to be monumental. It does not need to be productive. It does not need to justify itself against some universal timeline. It only needs to exist. And it does. Now comes the next fall. We often ask whether our lives matter in a vast universe, whether anything we do has significance against cosmic scales, whether meaning survives when time itself is uneven and indifferent. But this question assumes that meaning must scale to be real. It does not. Meaning does not compete with the universe. It occurs within it. Meaning is what happens when two timelines overlap long enough to change each other. That can happen between stars, between people, between a thought and a feeling. Scale is irrelevant. Now let us lift again, because this insight gently releases another pressure. The pressure to be everywhere, to know everything, to stay constantly informed, to keep up with a world that never synchronizes. But the universe does not ask you to keep up. It does not even keep up with itself. Why should you? Your responsibility is not to align with everything. It is to live fully inside the alignments you inhabit. Now let us drift further. Think about how often you feel pulled out of your present by imagined futures or unresolved pasts. Your awareness stretches beyond its local alignment, trying to synchronize with timelines it cannot reach. This stretching creates tension. Anxiety is often an attempt to inhabit too many nows at once. Regret is often an attempt to return to an alignment that no longer exists. But the universe does not allow that kind of synchronization. It allows only what overlaps. This is not limitation. It is clarity. Now, let us lift gently. Because once you accept that your now is local and sufficient, something softens. You no longer need to force presence. Presence is already happening. You are already inside an alignment that allows experience. That is all now ever was. Now let us drift deeper. This also changes how we think about waiting. Waiting feels painful because we imagine time as something we are stuck inside, unable to move forward. But waiting is simply being in a present moment that is not yet aligned with what you anticipate. The future has not arrived because its timeline has not intersected with yours. That intersection may happen, or it may not. Waiting is not emptiness. It is misalignment. Now comes the deeper twist. If time is uneven and now is local, then patience is not passive endurance. It is respect for alignment. It is recognizing that some interactions cannot be forced because their timelines do not yet overlap. This applies to people, to opportunities, to understanding. You cannot rush alignment. You can only remain where you are until overlap occurs. Now let us lift again, because this perspective reframes acceptance. Acceptance is not resignation to time's cruelty. It is recognition of time's structure. It is understanding that not everything belongs to your present, and that this is not a failure of attention. It is reality. Now let us drift outward one last time. The universe you live in does not offer a shared present. It offers countless local ones. They flicker, they dissolve, they reform, each one held together by interaction, each one valid where it occurs. And you are inside one of them now. This does not make you central. It makes you situated, and being situated is enough. Now let us slow, because we are approaching the final movement, not a conclusion, not a resolution, just a gentle widening of perspective. We will not answer the question of what time truly is. We will not reconcile all its contradictions. We will simply rest inside what has become clear, that the universe is not synchronized, that now is fragile. That awareness builds what physics does not provide, and that meaning emerges not from unity, but from meeting. The final chapter will not add new ideas. It will let the existing ones breathe, like the moment before sleep, like the pause between breaths, like the space where time loosens just enough for you to feel it without needing to define it. We are almost there, just one more drift, one more soft step, and then no ending. Only an opening that remains. There is no final moment, only a thinning of edges. After everything that has unfolded, after time fractured, after now dissolved into local agreements, after awareness learned to step out and return, nothing remains to be concluded. The universe does not close its argument. It does not arrive at a verdict. It continues, quietly, unevenly, without asking for resolution. This is the first fall. We are trained to look for endings, for a place where understanding settles and questions stop moving. We expect knowledge to complete itself, to form a circle that closes cleanly. But time has never behaved that way. If the universe does not share a single present, it cannot offer a single conclusion. Every ending would require synchronization. Every resolution would require agreement. And the universe does not promise either. Now let us lift gently. What it offers instead is something softer, continuation without closure, a reality where understanding deepens, not by finishing, but by loosening its grip, where insight does not arrive as certainty, but as a quiet shift in how things are held. You do not exit this story knowing what time is. You exit it sensing how time behaves, and sensing here is enough. This is the second fall. When we stop demanding that time makes sense globally, something unexpected happens. Confusion richedes, not because answers appear, but because the need for them dissolves. You no longer need time to be even. You no longer need now to be universal. You no longer need the universe to agree with itself. It never did. And yet, you are still here. Now let us drift. Think back not to the beginning of this exploration, but to the quiet moments in between. The places where an idea did not resolve, but opened, where something felt true without becoming fixed. Those moments are closer to how the universe actually unfolds, not as a sequence of conclusions, but as overlapping currents. Meaning does not arrive fully formed. It emerges briefly, where alignment allows and then dissolves back into motion. This is not loss, it is rhythm. Now let us lift again, because once you accept that there is no final present, you also accept that there is no final self. You are not a finished entity moving through time. You are a pattern sustained across alignments, memories, sensations, choices, interactions. These alignments change, so you change. And there is no moment where that process stops. This is not instability, it is life. Now let us drift inward. Notice how the present moment feels right now. Not sharply defined, not urgent, just present enough. It does not announce itself as now. It does not need to. It is simply the place where awareness and world are touching. That touch is gentle, temporary, sufficient. This is all a present moment ever was. Now let us lift gently, because this realization removes a quiet tension many people carry. The tension of trying to hold on to moments, trying to stay present, of fearing that life is slipping away because time keeps moving. But nothing is slipping away. Time is not carrying you forward. It is forming and dissolving alignments around you. You are not being dragged. You are participating. Now let us drift further. The universe does not rush. It does not hesitate. It does not aim. It unfolds. Some regions slow. Others accelerate. Some interactions persist. Others never meet. There is no central rhythm to keep up with, only local ones to listen to. Now comes the deeper fall. If the universe has no shared present, then nothing is happening too late or too early in any absolute sense. Things happen when their timelines intersect, that is all. A star explodes when conditions allow. A thought arises when signals align. A connection forms when rhythms overlap. None of these events are delayed. None are premature. They occur when they can. Now let us lift again, because this understanding softens judgment of yourself, of others, of the pace at which things unfold. You are not behind. You are not late. You are not missing the moment. You are inside the only moment that can exist where you are. Now let us drift. Think about the night sky. You are looking into countless different pasts, layered across distance. No two points of light agree on what time it is. And yet, the sky feels whole. Not because it is synchronized, but because your awareness does not require synchronization to experience beauty. The universe does not need to agree with itself to be witnessed. It only needs to be encountered. Now let us lift gently, because this also reframes loneliness. The universe may be asynchronous, but it is not empty. It is full of processes unfolding at different tempos. Many will never intersect with you. That does not make your intersections less real. It makes them rare, and rarity carries weight. Now, let us drift inward again. Every conversation you have, every shared silence, every moment of understanding, these are not guaranteed. They exist because two timelines overlapped long enough to matter. That overlap is precious. Not because it lasts forever, but because it happened at all. Now comes the final fall. We often imagine that if time were different, more even, more controlled, more predictable, life would be easier, fairer, more meaningful. But a perfectly synchronized universe would be sterile. Nothing would arrive late. Nothing would be anticipated. Nothing would linger. Nothing would echo. Meaning requires delay. It requires misalignment. It requires the space between cause and effect where response can form. Now let us lift again, because this brings us to a quiet acceptance. Time is uneven, and that unevenness is not something to overcome. It is something to live with, not by understanding it fully, but by resting inside its patterns. Now let us drift slowly. You do not need to know what time truly is. You only need to know what it allows. It allows meeting, it allows change, it allows consequence, it allows care. It allows this moment, fragile, local, temporary, to exist at all. Now let us slow. There is nothing more to add. No final insight waiting beyond this one. The universe does not resolve into clarity. It remains in motion, and you remain inside one of its many valid presents. That is not a small thing. It is everything that can be. So there is no conclusion here, only a gentle widening, a sense that the question has not been answered because it does not need to be. If time does not flow evenly across the universe, if now exists only where alignment allows, if awareness assembles what physics does not provide, then perhaps the most honest response is not explanation, but presence. Not the kind that tries to hold on, but the kind that allows. Close your eyes if you wish, not to escape time, but to feel how lightly it is being held. The universe is still unfolding, not together, not apart, just enough, and so are you.